Everybody ready to go? Okay, here we go. Well, good evening, everybody. It is September 19th, 2023, and this is the Edina City Council meeting. Hope you're in the right place, right town. It is about 7:05 p.m. and as Director Benarott said at the prior to the meeting commencing this evening, there are some folks that are watching remotely using this hybrid system that we put in place pre-COVID, during COVID, and post-COVID. Actually started during COVID, not pre-COVID. So they may be watching on cable TV or on dinamn.gov live meetings or on Facebook. And they'll have a couple opportunities to call in this evening. One is to participate in community comment, and the second opportunity is during a public hearing. We have one public hearing this evening involving the fire station. And the number you can call for either opportunity should come up on the screen here. That's the number you want to call. That's the conference PIN number right there, the 602 number. Press star 1 to speak to an operator, and they'll bring you into Director Benarott, and she'll bring you into the council. The involvement with the community on community comment will come up fairly quickly, so folks should be aware of that. So having provided that information, let's call the meeting to order, and I'm going to ask our clerk, Sharon Ellison, to call the roll.
Councilmember Agnew.
Here.
Councilmember Jackson.
Here.
Councilmember Pierce.
Here.
Councilmember Risser.
Here.
Mayor Hovland.
Here. Next is the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thanks, everyone. And we've got a form of meeting agenda in front of us this evening. It was published before we had somebody notify us that they couldn't participate in sketch plan review this evening. So if you look on your agenda, it is 9F that will be taking off the agenda this evening, the sketch plan review. So with the exclusion of the sketch plan review for 5120 and 5124 Hankerson Avenue, are there any other changes or additions to the agenda? Otherwise, is there a motion to approve the agenda in that amended form?
So moved. I second.
Member Agnew seconds. Member Jackson moves the adoption of the agenda in its amended form with the elimination of 9F, which is the sketch plan review. Any further discussion? All those in favor of adoption of the motion as stated say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. And now we are at community comment. So I'm going to first go to folks in the audience that are residents of our community or may not be residents of our community, but we'll use this opportunity to visit with people in the chambers and invite anyone to come forward that has a concern they want to address with the council that's not on the agenda this evening or scheduled for a future public hearing. So feel free to come up, and as Director Benarott indicated, you'll have 3 minutes. You'll get a little yellow warning light when you get you have 30 seconds left, and then you should be thinking about wrapping up your comments. So feel free to come forward if you want to visit with the council. Good evening.
Good evening. My name is Tim Barzin, and my parents and my siblings and I lived at the end of Interlochen Boulevard for 16 years when Interlochen Boulevard ended at our dead end.
Would you give us your present address too, Mr. Barzin?
Sure. 5285 Kelsey Terrace, Edina.
Thank you.
My wife and I built our retirement home on that same place, Kelsey Terrace, near in Parkwood Knolls neighborhood 10 years ago. Prior to that, we raised our 3 girls living on Upper Terrace near the Lake Cornelia area for 35 years. That's a total of 61 years enjoying the neighborhood in which I was raised, and those neighborhoods that I returned to from 7 years of service in the Navy to raise my family and to find my retirement. Since 1995, the year that my father died, my mother moved back to Edina, where she spent the greater portion of her 104 years because of her attachment to the area and all that it provided. Because of the need for additional space to handle personal and business dealings, I rented an office space at 5780 Lincoln Drive. Sound familiar? For the past 29 years, I've enjoyed being a part of this office community, and it's perfect for me since it's walkable or bikeable from my home, as opposed to having to drive to Southdale or other suitable places. It's in what could be called an urban forest, yet accessible. I feel safe in coming to work any time of the day or night, and think of most of the tenants feel the same way. When I was recently made aware of the small area plan concept, which is referred to in the 2018 City of Edina Comprehensive Plan, I thought what a wonderful idea that was. To have thoughtful development plan, which included small offices, restaurants, and low-density housing, that was compatible with the neighborhood. So my request for all of you is for the city to consider seriously a small area development plan which would bring neighbors together. Let the neighborhood have a say in how thoughtful development plan could benefit everyone and be in concert with the existing City of Edina 2018 Comprehensive Plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Barzin. Now, you've all seen that movie Top Gun and Tom Cruise. Mr. Barzin there was a Top Gun in the Navy. People don't know that generally about him, but I know it from knowing him for many, many years, that he was a Top Gun in the Navy before he was a Delta Airlines pilot. Good evening. Thank you.
Could I have a microphone? Yes.
We're going to get you a handheld microphone.
Hello. Okay, my name, Janie Weston, 6136 Brookview Avenue. Let's see, can we have the overhead camera hit this?
It's up.
Oh, okay, it doesn't show up on here. No, that's okay.
I can fix it.
That's fine. Okay, my house is right here. I used to live on that corner. I moved to this corner house in 2002, lived there for 2 years, and then moved around the corner. Because of, since 2008, there have, which was the very first tear-down, new-build house in my neighborhood, there has been a tremendous amount of original home loss, as well as lots being divided 100 feet into two 50-foot lots, which the minimum lot width is 75 feet, according to city code, and that still stands. But there has also been a huge amount of tree loss. And I wanted to get some facts and figures, some hard data that you can look at, other people in the city can look at, our city forester can look at. And I surveyed just my west side of Pamela Park, closer neighborhood, not the whole Pamela Park neighborhood, but where it's crosshatched on this map here. So these are the results that I got. I began this survey in very early July. I just finished it a couple weeks ago. And the results are more alarming than I even thought they were. There were a total of 202 properties. I walked through the whole neighborhood, wrote down every address, made a chart to indicate whether it was original home, original with expansion, or maybe second floor added, tear down in process, and tear down with new home. Then I also noted what tree loss that there was on the front and sides of the property. Sometimes this 100% included the back. Because when a tear-down builder builds a home that's maxed out for the maximum allowed on a 50-foot wide lot, they go all the way back, and very few trees survive this. They're either on the lot line, side lot line, or way in the back, maybe. And so out of 202 properties, almost half have now been tear downs. And almost half have had 100% tree loss on their lots. And here are the other figures for 60 to 90% loss, 59% down to some lower figure, and then the ones that have no tree loss, only 35%. A few of them I had to put unknown because I just simply could not remember. Okay. This is something that is not good for our city. It's not good for our heating bills. It's not good for our health. It's not good for the environment and the birds, insects, animals that make our city a more pleasant place to live. When I walk past a new tear-down home, the only tree replacement that I see on them is basically a maple tree. Perhaps a different type of tree. Only 2 have had oak trees for new oak trees, replacing what had been lost before. And oak trees take a long time to grow. Many have been lost. And our city code needs to be worked on to make it much more difficult for builders to be able to completely clear a lot and affect the neighboring properties too. So
Thanks for
here's
doing
some
this.
facts and figures for you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, this will, I'm eager to look at our new tree ordinance and compare it with this, so thank you for doing that. All right. Good evening.
Good evening, Mayor. Good evening, my name is Ralph Sickert. I live at 4311 Cornelia Circle. A month ago, I appeared before the council. I'm sure my comments and their tone took many of you aback. It was meant to. For years, our Lake Association and others have tried to proactively partner and provide thoughtful input to the Water Resources staff, to no avail. For over 10 years, Lake Cornelia has been infested with curly-leaf pondweed, a plant recognized by the Minnesota DNR as an invasive species. Per staff's own presentations, and I quote, eliminating curly-leaf pondweed improves the native aquatic plant community and reduces the phosphorus released into the water. DNR best management practices recommend control of curly-leaf pondweed with herbicide. This past spring and also in 2022, the staff chose not to treat Lake Cornelia, leading to a significant curly-leaf outbreak. This choice was shameful in 2 respects. One, the decision was not based on an alternative strategy, but rather staff chose a do-nothing strategy. And 2, the decision not to treat was based on a flawed lake survey. Had staff showed the smallest amount of intellectual curiosity and critical thinking skills, there was real-time data to debunk the flawed survey. Instead, staff countered with, it was a late ice out. The late spring and plentiful cloudy days led to delayed growth. I wish we could have hit the timing perfectly. An approach that meets the threshold of a reply, but not an answer, much like my dog ate my homework. In contrast to staff's conjecture, residents offered the following 4 points. 1, timing of Cornelia's survey was not an issue. Curlyleaf's life cycle starts in October and it grows under the ice during the winter. Had the survey been performed as contracted, Curlyleaf would have been found. On the same day, Lake Cornelia was surveyed. Lake Arrowhead was also surveyed. Both water bodies have similar histories with respect to curlyleaf and herbicide treatments. The survey of Arrowhead noted 45% of the survey points with curlyleaf. Cornelia's survey, 5%. 2, multiple residents observed the vendor's canoe traveling exclusively around the perimeter of the lake, some 20 feet from shore, and the vendor was not observed dipping a rake to sample for emergent growth. The city's contract required the vendor to crisscross the lake some 18 times while dipping a rake 128 times at preset GPS points to sample for emergent growth. 3, curlyleaf and its seeds do not survive freezing conditions. Through mid-January, the South Basin's water level was some 14 inches below its ordinary high water mark, which created a 10-foot beach around the South Basin. The lower water level in turn caused the lake bottom to freeze out along the shoreline. By May 13th, the water levels were back to normal, and the path traversed by the vendor was exactly the area that froze out. 4, it was simply not physically possible for the vendor to have performed the work he claimed to have done on 7 water bodies in a single day. So why has the tone of our message changed? Water Resources staff continues to disregard resident concerns and ignore every reasonable recommendation for change. Edina deserves better. Minnesota deserves better. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Zickert. Would you want to leave your comments with the clerk? Or do you think that having it be part of the record is sufficient? Yeah, you're certainly welcome to make it part of the record. All right. Anybody else wish to address the council? Yes, sir.
I wish to address the council.
Good evening.
My name is Robert Rusnak. I live at 6232 Idlewood Lane, Edina, Minnesota, and I've done so for over 30 years. And I'm speaking to you because I am in favor of the small area plan to be implemented in 2024. And why am I speaking to you in such a fashion? Because I want to create a neighborhood node small area plan for the 44.87 acres that includes the Lincoln Drive 169 portion of Northwest Edina. And I'm hoping that this small area plan should be included in the 2024 Planning Commission plan that includes funding. I believe that this small area plan provides an opportunity to create a transition zone, a general transition zone from the low-density area of Parkwood Knolls and Londonderry townhomes to the proposed Bredesen small area plan. Now, the reason I'm speaking to you in this way is because I favor the small area plan because I don't want to see the systematic degradation of Edina neighborhoods by ill-considered development that doesn't include some neighborhood involvement. And I believe that the small area plan could function in a way to assure neighborhood involvement in any subsequent development of this parcel of land.
Very good. Well, thank you. Thank you for that suggestion.
You're welcome.
I know that at least one of your other neighbors has suggested that, and we've had several emails on it, and there's been some conversation amongst council members about it as well. Anyone else?
Thank you, Council, for letting me speak tonight. My name is Kirk Adell, and I live at 4800 Hilltop Lane. I do have some concerns tonight about the vote by the City Council to approve a double-digit tax increase for tax-paying citizens of Edina to support affordable housing for the next 3 years. 3 years in double-digit increases for the next 3 years. I say this in the context of all the City Council members and the Mayor, with the exception of the 2 new council members, who have voted and given developers what I would consider sweetheart deals with TIF financing to build very large apartment buildings that are overwhelmingly at market rate. It is my understanding that the city has established goals to build a certain number of units of affordable housing, and those have not been met. What we're looking at now is the citizens of Edina are being faced with double-digit HRA tax levy increases for the next 3 years. At least that's what's being voted on tonight, that do not currently exist in Edina. My personal opinion is, I think the developers should bear the burden of building affordable housing in Edina. I don't think that's happened. And I think what is happening now is you are asking the citizens of Edina to bear the burden of building affordable housing for people that don't live in Edina. I'm not saying that affordable housing is not needed in the city of Edina. The land in Edina is some of the most valuable real estate in the state, if not the country. Why do developers get a free pass? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dolan. All right, anybody else? Let's go online and see if we have anybody waiting to speak to the council.
I have a lot of people on the line tonight. So we have people in the queue as well. So callers, a few of you are in the queue. You should have heard a voice prompt to indicate, or you should hear a voice prompt to indicate when your line is open. So please listen for that voice prompt and then begin by stating your full name and address for the record. First caller, please go ahead. Go ahead, caller.
Yes.
There you go. Thank you.
Yes, my name is Jim Groats, and I live at 5513 Park Place.
Mr. Gross, it's hard to.
tonight.
Mr. Gross, hold on a second. We got a volume issue here. Might be on our end.
Go ahead, Mr. Groats. I think we've got you turned up now.
Okay, my name is Jim Groats. I live at 5513 Park Place. I live in the area of 54th Street, and this is the area where we recently, some months ago, the Metropolitan Transit Commission has abandoned a bus route. And all the signage is still there, which is troubling. If you're going to abandon a bus route, please take down your signs. And please take down your no parking signs, because of no parking bus stop. Because, if you're not going to have a bus stop anymore, because you've abandoned the route, why is it there? I would request that somebody from the city contact the MTC and ask them to kindly remove all of their signage and all of their signposts on the former 6B route, since they are no longer going to offer that service, because it creates tremendous visual pollution and takes away some otherwise very valuable parking spaces, particularly in the location of 54th and France and elsewhere. Thank you for your consideration.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Groats. We'll check on that.
Next caller, please go ahead. As a reminder, please begin by stating your full name and address for the record.
Good evening, Council. My name is Susan Lee. I live at 6708 Point Drive.
Ma'am, would you repeat your name, please?
My name is Susan Lee. I live at 6708 Point Drive. For those of us who were part of the Comprehensive Plan Task Force in 2018, if there was one lesson we learned the hard way, it was that the Planning Commission must begin to work on the small area plans much earlier in the process. In fact, they should be working on small area plans throughout the entire decade preceding, and not just the last 2 years leading up to the actual comp plan update. I recently listened to the audio recording of the August 30th Planning Commission work session discussing their 2024 work plan items. It did not appear that the planning commissioners had been given much direction as to the necessity to to prioritize their work items for completion by the end of 2024. The purpose of the small area plan is to get ahead of the development curve, provide a roadmap to developers so that any submitted projects will lead towards a single, cohesive, and unified vision. With projects already arriving on the doorstep in the Lincoln Road 169 corridor, what is the Planning Commission waiting for? Not only is the area already identified in our current comp plan as a potential area of change, it was also first identified, as some of you may recall, in the May 24th, 2017 Big Ideas Planning Workshop led by then City Council member Mike Fisher. The small area plans that will eventually be approved as part of the 2028 Comprehensive Plan update need to begin now. The Planning Commission work item number 2 simply requires a quick affirmation by them that the Lincoln Road 169 corridor is an area of potential change. They should also include a recommendation that a budget be set now to hire a consultant and complete the small area plan all within 2024. Edina residents should not have to wait any longer for the Planning Commission to get its act together. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lee.
I do have a number of other callers on the line. As a reminder, if you'd like to speak, please press star 1 on your telephone keypad. That's the asterisk symbol, then the number 1. That will get you into the queue to speak. And I have another caller. Please listen for the prompt, and once you hear it, your line is open. Please begin by stating your full name and record for the address, for the record.
Hello, my name is Martha Anderson, and I live at 6205 Parkwood Road in Edina. We've been a resident on Parkwood Road for 37 years. I also own a business and the building located at 4902 Lincoln Drive, where I operate my business. I think it's very critical, as the previous speaker noted, that the small plan be evaluated quickly in 2024 for the Lincoln development. There is an opportunity there for the city to really take a look at those wetlands and what development they have today. My business on Lincoln Drive is commercial property management and commercial real estate. And I think an opportunity for the small business or the small plan evaluation is now in 2024. And I urge the council to take a look. I've also sent each of you a personal email. I would welcome you to walk that property and to look at what opportunity it holds for Edina. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Anderson.
If any other caller would like to make a comment, please press star 1 on your telephone keypad. It looks like someone else just signaled. Nope, someone's out. Again, if you'd like to speak, please press star 1 on your telephone keypad, not pound 1. That takes you out of the queue. Star or asterisk symbol, number 1. I'm not seeing anyone else. They may be on for the public hearing, so I think it's safe for you to move forward.
Mr. Zickert, did you forget something?
No, I'd like to add, my name is Ralph Zickert. I live at 4311 Cornelia Circle. I'd like to add to the comment that was made earlier with respect to the HRA assessment. I urge the council to vote no to the assessment, only because the council has not raised the price that contractors must pay to buy out of their affordable housing units. And until that happens, I think it's unreasonable for the council to put this cost upon residents, as was said by the previous speaker. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Zickert. All right. Okay. Thanks, folks. So most of these comments will be addressed in the next meeting that we have, and it is our practice to have the city manager respond to community comments from the prior meeting. So we're going to ask our city manager, Scott Neal, to respond to the community comments that were made at our last city council meeting. Manager Neal.
Thank you, Your Honor. We had 4 community commenters at our September 5th meeting. One, Steve Brown from the Edina Neighbors for Affordable Housing, talked about who lives in affordable housing in Edina, just showing some comparisons between incomes and job titles. Then we had 3 folks who talked about from the Parkwood Lane, Parkwood Road, Knoll Drive area, from Parkwood Knolls, who talked about their support for a small area plan at the 5780 Lincoln Drive, and that was all we had.
All right, very good. Thank you. That prompt any questions or comments from council members? Councilmember Jackson?
Yes, thank you. So regarding the small area plan, when does that come before us, what the Planning Commission is thinking of doing? When do we have that conversation with the Planning Commission?
A small area plan can come, can really be put into play 2 different ways. It can come up from the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission could ask you, may we do a small area plan? But it's just as legitimate for it to start at the council level and for you to direct the Planning Commission to include it in their work plan. So it can happen either way.
And where are they at in the Planning Commission, or the work plan process?
Well, they're in the same place all the other boards and commissions are, so they're putting their work plan together. And Mr. Teague, how are they doing on that?
Yes, they approved their work plan at their last meeting, so that would be presented to you on October 3rd at the work session, where each commission's chair will present the plan.
Okay, terrific. Thank you.
I was actually thinking we should talk about this issue when we get to the end of the meeting, council concerns, and have a conversation about it, because it could be directed by us. We could modify their work plan, but I think we should have that conversation later this evening. Any other questions or comments as a result of Manager Neal's comments? Okay. All right. Let's then go on to the consent agenda. Is there anyone on the council that wishes to remove an item from the consent agenda? All right. Is there a motion to approve all of the items on the consent agenda in a single motion?
So moved.
Member Jackson moves.
Second.
Member Risser seconds the adoption of the items on the consent agenda in a single motion. Any further discussion? All those in favor of adoption of the motion stated, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Carried. Those are adopted. And now we are on to a couple of items. Actually, one is a proclamation, and I think Diana Lynch is sitting in the front row. We don't know each other, but
No, not at all.
She's with the Monument Chapter of the Daughters of the American Revolution, and she's present to receive this proclamation. And I will read the proclamation that I am fairly certain the council will adopt. The proclamation is with respect to Constitution Week, and that's September 17th through the 23rd, 2023. And that proclamation reads as follows: whereas it is the privilege of all Americans to commemorate the 236th anniversary of the drafting of the Constitution of the United States of America with appropriate ceremonies and activities. And whereas it is fitting and proper to officially recognize this magnificent document and the anniversary of its creation, and whereas Public Law 915 guarantees the issuance of a proclamation by the President of the United States of America designating September 17th through the 23rd as Constitution Week. Now, therefore, the City Council of the City of Edina does hereby proclaim the week of September 17 through 23 as Constitution Week in Edina, and urges all citizens to study the Constitution, reflect on the privilege of being an American with all the rights and responsibilities that privilege involves, and to reaffirm the ideals of our U.S. Constitution. Is there a motion to adopt the proclamation as stated?
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Member Jackson, second by Member Pierce to adopt the proclamation proclaiming September 17 through the 23rd, 2023 as Constitution Week. All those in favor of adoption of the proclamation say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Carried. I'm going to walk down and hand it to you. You may have some remarks, Ms. Lynch?
I do.
Yes.
Always.
We'll look forward to it. Let me hand this to you first. And I think they want to get a photo.
Yes, my 5 minutes of fame.
All right, big smiles. Just a couple more. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good to see you. Yeah, good to see you.
If I may. Mayor Hovland and City Council members, I am a member of the Daughters of the American Revolution Monument Chapter, and I want to thank you for the Constitution Week proclamation from the City of Edina. I'm not sure how many years it has been that we've been receiving this proclamation from the city, but I know it's been very many. We deeply appreciate your recognition of the Constitution and in turn our patriots that fought for our freedom. Thank you for your time this evening. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, the next matter and the final matter on the special recognitions and presentations portion of the agenda is a opioid settlement fund update by Jeff Brown, our Community Health Administrator. And he's got Nick Kelly with him from our Bloomington Public Health Department that we receive our services from here in the city of Edina. And so, Mr. Kelly, welcome. Nice to have you here. And we're going to hear a little bit about how the opioid settlement funds are positively impacting our city and our neighborhood, broader neighborhood.
Thank you, Mayor Hovland, members of the council. Just as a brief refresher and introduction for Nick, the city of Edina is one of 4 cities in Minnesota that is designated as a community health board by Minnesota Statute 145A, which does detail public health responsibilities that we need to fulfill. We do that in 2 different ways. We have local Edina staff that work in my division of the fire department, and we do things like food, pools, and lodging inspection, public health nuisance investigation, things like that, housing and property maintenance code enforcement. And the second way we fulfill those duties is a contract with Bloomington Public Health and NICS staff. Things like the WIC clinics, public health nursing, family home visiting, tobacco cessation and prevention, health assessments, and lots of other things. The City of Richfield also contracts with Bloomington Public Health for public health activities, and we use the term collaborative autonomy to kind of describe how we work together. This model has been in place since 1977 when the Local Public Health Act was adopted in Minnesota. So as the opioid fund settlement, or opioid settlement funds were becoming available, we're planning to use a similar model to spend those dollars between Bloomington, Edina, and Richfield. Nick is here to give an overview of that project, some future planning, and answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Brown.
It's good to be here. Nice to see you, Mayor Hovland, and council members. This gives you a little reminder of the context of why we're talking about opioids. This is the number of opioid-involved emergency and hospital visits in Hennepin County. So for context, alcohol is the number 1. Opioids is number 2, cannabis is number 3. In last year's reporting from Hennepin County, so this is EMR, electronic medical record data from all the hospitals and clinics in Hennepin County. And this looks at the grim cost we've seen of opioids. That really steep curve we've seen in the last few years is largely driven by fentanyl and the impact that has had in our community. And so you can see 340 lives were lost in Hennepin County due to opioids. That's a substantial impact and a substantial challenge and part of the motivation behind the settlement. And so when Minnesota joined the settlement against the pharmaceutical companies, the distributors, Edina got part of that settlement, and you can see the funds there. When we combine the 3 cities together to do this work over the next 18 years, or 17-ish years now, it's about $3.5 million. And that is really targeted to do innovative policy and system change so that we can turn the tide of this epidemic and the harm it is causing in our community. So the way we're doing that is a very collaborative process. We have updated our website with a lot of resources to support education and information about opioids in the community. And we have a phenomenal working group that's been very active. So we've had incredible participation from our Edina Health Commission, along with Edina Police and Fire, really trying to help us get to how do we make changes and move things forward. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that Edina Schools is also part of this process, along with community members and partners and providers across the 3 cities. That's really honed in the work. Thinking about this, some of you may have recalled some of those tobacco settlements that Minnesota pioneered and changed the way we think about indoor air and clean air. Same thing is happening with opioids. This is going to change the trajectory of how we deal with some of those substances. So we're focused on really making sure we have a solid foundation to support this work, because it's going to go on for 18 years. The data and the analysis, marketing and education, a lot of people are still thinking opioids aren't going to necessarily impact them. The reality is most people have had an experience or more than one experience with a family member dealing with opioids. Partnerships, and then a rapid response. One of the challenges we keep running into is the incredible work our first responders do providing Narcan. Somebody wants to get help. The support is not there right now because the system is really fragmented. And so what we're doing on the back end is really trying to make sure that we can fix some of those gaps. So if somebody gets Narcan, recovers, wants that help and support, it's often really hard to do. And so that's one of the key things that we're working on doing, along with really making sure our schools can use the best practices out there to support the students and the community that they're serving. So that's a high level of what we're doing. We're going to continue to work very closely with the Edina Health Commission on this work, and Edina's first responders as we continue to do this work. So thank you.
Yes, thank you. I think some of our council members have questions for you, Mr. Kelly, and I'm going to turn to them now if anybody has a question about the work you're doing around opioids and particularly fentanyl. I think we saw in a paper a week or so ago, and the sheriff had been on in a press conference, and we're seeing one person per day passing away in just our county from fentanyl. And I was with the chief prosecutor for the felony division for Hennepin County on Monday morning, and he was telling me about some of the tragic stories they're hearing about small children getting access to fentanyl and dying quickly because of the ingestion of the fentanyl. So I'm wondering what kind of strategies we're thinking about employing, at least preliminarily, around working with our police department on a broader basis, others, and then also just the public health aspects of it, so that we're well informed and we can help support you in the work that you're going to be doing.
Mayor Evelyn, that's a great question. One of the things that we're really doing and trying to drive is let the data really help drive our work. And so we're looking at the overdose data in the 3 cities we serve and getting that feedback from our first responders and hearing those stories and working with our recovery partners to say, okay, how do we change? So the way opioids is impacting the 3 cities is a little different than the way it impacts what often we hear talked about in the Hennepin County side. And so we work very closely with our county partner, recognizing a lot of that work deals on the human service side, making sure that there's that support and recovery. We're not seeing that gap right now, and we're very closely monitoring that to make sure we're not having that gap, especially on the early child side. We don't want to see those, but that's not something that we're focused on primarily because of where the data is driving us. We're looking at that gap in recovery. So it's not uncommon for somebody to go through a recovery with Narcan and then ask for help and be told to wait 6 weeks or more. That has to be much shorter. And so we're working on some pilots to try and dramatically shorten that and make sure that we can provide those services through some partners.
Okay. Other council members have questions? Or yes. Councilmember Jackson.
Yes, thank you. So thank you, Dr. Kelly. We've got
I heard one of the stories that was in the announcement from Hennepin County was about a high school student who had been injured. Are we working with our various sports medicine community to sort of, I think of teenagers as being especially vulnerable to this, and really helping them know about the risks and to watch for addiction after an injury? So what are we doing about the teenagers, and especially teenagers in sports?
It's a great question, Councilmember Jackson. That is something that is really being driven largely by our partners in the medical field. And so there's a lot that's been happening in place with prescribing and education that goes out with those information. It's fairly standard practice now that when an opioid's prescribed for an injury or an accident, that they're also issued Narcan and provided instructions about addiction and process. And that's something we're also coordinating and making sure that our school partners in Edina don't have any gaps in that resource. They're very much on top of that and working very closely. So we're coordinating with the school nurses in the 3 cities, including here in Edina, trying to make sure there's none of those gaps. And with state law change, there's ample Narcan in the schools. So we're trying to make sure that's not a challenge.
Great, thank you.
You know, one other thing our council is concerned about, and I think every other council across the state, with the legalization of cannabis, we've got a period of time here where we can try to figure out how we're going to kind of deal with it from a policy standpoint and an operational standpoint, and dispensaries and other things. But it strikes me that the cannabis we see now is probably not the kind of cannabis that existed 20, 30 years ago in terms of its potency. And I'm wondering if you've given any preliminary thought to the issue whether this could become a public health issue as we see more use of cannabis in a legal form.
So Mayor Hovland, you are absolutely correct. The potency of the cannabis that we're seeing on the market today is substantially higher than what we even saw a decade ago, let alone if you're trying to compare it to what might have been on the market in the 70s. So one of the challenges that we see on the public health end is making sure individuals under 21, especially our young children, don't have access to it. And so that's where one of our main concerns on the public health is. And then especially thinking about pregnant moms and young kids, infants, and then thinking about the challenge that our law enforcement partners are going to have with impaired driving or that reality, recognizing that there's a delayed onset depending on the route of exposure, that people are going to have to adapt to better as they use other legal substances, and what that does to their driving abilities.
Thank you, Doctor. Anybody else have anything as a follow-on? All right, well, thanks for being with us this evening.
My pleasure.
And pleased to be part of the settlement and have these collective resources gathered up at about $3.5 million to help us do some effective work through our 3 communities. So thanks for coming over this evening.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks.
Very good. That concludes the special recognitions and presentations portion of the agenda, and now we are going to go to the public hearing portion of the agenda. We have only one matter in the public hearing portion of the agenda this evening, and Director Teague, Carrie Teague, our Community Development Director, has the matter from an introductory standpoint. And as I mentioned in the opening, it involves our proposed fire station number 2, because there are some things we need to address there with respect to that particular fire station. So Director Teague, thanks for being with us this evening.
Yes, thank you, Mayor, members of the council. When this project was reviewed at sketch plan review, you may recall we were contemplating PUD rezoning of the entire 8 acres. We looked at a number of development scenarios that the architect had put together. But at that time, there was no definitive what the use should be on the southern 2/3 or even that specific development pattern. So it's difficult to adopt a PUD ordinance when there's so much up in the air on that southern portion of the site. So with that, staff is recommending utilizing the existing zoning district, the PID district, Currently, that use is not allowed in the district, so what's in front of the council is an ordinance amendment. We can figure out the pattern of development at a later date. It possibly could be a PUD zoning or perhaps another zoning district. But the way the site has been laid out, access is still provided to the south. So there's still the possibility of doing something very creative on the south half of the site. So the site you're all familiar with, located west of France on 76th. Again, it's a little over 8 acres in size. You can see the large, roughly 100,000 square foot building with a large parking lot. The property... It's on the screen, but...
Here, we're back. Nope. Gone again. Back again.
Okay, so that is what's on TV, now it's in this room, so I will tell Scott he has to stay on PowerPoint. You may proceed.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay, so the site is guided in our comprehensive plan for office residential use. There's a number of zoning districts within that area. This site, again, is zoned planned industrial district. So again, when the architect started laying out the design of the site, he started with the design experience guidelines. One of the founding principles of that document is to try to divide large parcels like this into smaller parcels, using a 200 by 200 square foot block. In designing a fire station, it's difficult to do that within a 200 by 200 block. The width of this building is 260 feet wide, and it was reduced from the time that the council saw it at sketch plan. So it was really difficult to utilize that 200 by 200 square foot blocks with all the activities that are going on within this facility. This is one of the examples that we looked at sketch plan. Fire station on the north end. So as you can see, and it's the same location as proposed this evening, so there's still lots of possibilities for future development. Potential for a street south of the fire station. We talked about this pedestrian bike promenade through the site. All of those things are still possible. Could be used for additional public buildings or some other type of development. Again, all that possible in the future. So the applicant has made a number of revisions from the sketch plans. They've enhanced the landscaping. They've included permeable brick pavers in the parking areas. They've added a water feature on the west side of the building, and they reduced the width of the building by 22 feet to try to address that issue on 76th. So here's a look at the site plan. Again, with the accesses that would potentially gain access to the southern portion of the site, both on the east and west side of the building. Main fire trucks would enter off 76th here. You can see in this kind of salmon colored, that's the permeable pavers, extensive landscaping all around the site. This would be a look at the overall site plan, the total 8 acres. They would seed that south half with the existing wetland. So just ready for future development or however the council sees fit to utilize that southern portion. So these next series of slides are the building architecture. The council is pretty familiar with these as the architect has brought them before the council within the last few months. So I'll move through these quickly. Trace Jock, the architect, is online with us this evening. Here's a view from the northwest, west elevation. From the south side, you can see the enhanced landscaping. Again, on the view from the southwest, this is that water feature on that side of the building entrance. So this request requires the ordinance amendment to allow the language that we're suggesting in the code is taken right from the R1 zoning district where these uses are allowed. So that would be publicly owned and operated civic and cultural institutions, but not limited to administrative offices, libraries, public safety buildings. So that would be a permitted use in the planned industrial district. Again, currently those uses are allowed in the R1 zoning district. As the council recalls, when you were considering the location of the fire department, there was a couple of finalists for the site location. One of them was zoned R1, but that wasn't well received in the Roslyn Park. That wasn't well received in the neighborhood there, thinking this type of use would be more appropriate in an industrial district. Along with the site plan, there are some variances requested here. The signage at the front of the building, they'd like to increase the size of that front signage, as well as having signage on the side of the building, which is currently not allowed by code. Also some building variances. The first floor building height in portions of the building would be reduced from 20 feet, the code requirement, to 11. And that first level transparency requirement of 75% would be reduced to 45%. So first, with the ordinance amendment, we did a survey of some of our neighboring communities to find out if they regulated these types of uses, if they allowed them in their industrial parks. And so as you note on the right side of the screen here, all of our neighboring communities, cities that we surveyed here, do allow them within their industrial parks, fire station, and public type buildings, with the exception of Richfield. All the cities also allow these types of uses in the R1 district. So the ordinance that's before the council this evening is similar to some of our neighboring cities. So again, the ordinance is simply allowing these as a permitted use. Review of the site plan. It's basically code compliant with the exception of the variances that I mentioned. The parking stalls provided is code compliant. Code requires 83 stalls. 90 are proposed here. A parking study was done by Stantec. Ed Terhar was the lead on that. He is with us this evening virtually if you have any questions in regard to the parking or the traffic. Traffic study did conclude that no improvements are needed to adjacent roadways. The existing roadways can support this project. Landscaping is code compliant, well over our code requirements. Building height is also code compliant. This site allows up to 12 stories, so we're well within that. There are sidewalks provided all around the site. Again, they can be extended to future development to the south as well as the roadways. And this project would meet the city's sustainable buildings policy. So here's just a quick look at the compliance table. Again, I mentioned the variances that are requested here. So in considering the variances, first, that first floor height and transparency, staff believes that those variances are justified. They're reasonable given the proposed use of the building. The 20-foot floor height with the 75% transparency on the street, not necessarily appropriate for office and living quarters of a fire station. These requirements also run contrary to the city's sustainable buildings policy. They're not energy efficient, really both of those standards. The apparatus bays and the community room will meet the 20-foot ceiling height requirement. And the Planning Commission does have it on their work plan to consider some amendments to that 20-foot first floor height requirement and 75% transparency. That's been an issue with pretty much every project that's come through since that code went into effect. In regard to the sign variances, again, staff believes these are reasonable given the size of the front of the building. The size of the proposed signage, we'll take a look at it here in a minute, is in scale with the building, again, given that large front. That front-facing signage takes up less than 2% of the wall facade. If you compare that to a commercial zoning district, they're allowed up to 15% of the wall facade for signage. The proposed signage makes the building easily identifiable as a fire station and civic facility. Issues have come up in the past in regard to existing fire stations that are not easily identifiable. The practical difficulty here in not meeting the sign ordinance would result in a sign that's not in scale with the building and difficult to see. The city fire logo and the twos provide branding of the facility and are also seen as important architectural features. That sidewall signage, if those were public streets on the east and west side of the building, the Fire Station 2 signs would be allowed, but as it's not a public thoroughfare at this point, the variances are requested. So again, here's the signage. The total square footage in this area is 107 square feet. The code would allow 50 square feet. So if you could imagine reducing that down to half of that size, it would get lost within the building. The signage here, this is the side signage that's currently not allowed by code. And the other side here, as well as the number 2, which identifies the building again, and it provides another architectural feature. So with that, staff is recommending approval of the ordinance amendment and the site plan with variances, subject to the findings and conditions that are outlined. The request this evening is for you to close the public hearing on September 25th, continue action to October 3rd. The Planning Commission did review this at their last meeting, and their recommendation on a 5-3 vote was for denial. Some of the concerns that they had were not fitting the fire station within the 200 by 200 foot blocks to more closely follow those design experience guidelines. Also, they had some concerns about not using the PUD. They wanted to see development of the overall site. So those were some of their findings. With that, I can answer any questions you might have.
Sure. Thank you, Director Teague. And Member Risser has some questions right off the bat here. She'll lead us off.
First, I want to say I do appreciate moving away from PUD. I think that is a good way to go. I really need to see if we could get an image of Edina's zoning map up in the future land use map. And I don't know if that's possible or not, but what I really am concerned about is we would be changing the language across the PID. And if you look at the future land use map, the area that you're looking at makes so much sense to change it because it is identified as for future use being office residential. And one of the uses is institutional use. Okay, and that would include a fire station. Also within that area, and this is the band where you see the yellow. Okay, so it's where we have more commercial use. It's where the Drooling Moose is going to be, right? But if you go to the Cahill district, you've got industrial zoning that is not the same. And I really feel that if we are going to respect all of the work, the time, the effort, the community feedback that went into the comprehensive plan, and if we're going to move forward in a logical way with zoning, we need to have 2 distinct industrial zones. One which is guided for change, and the other which is not, which is supposed to stay pure industrial. So that is my biggest concern.
A portion of the Cahill, you're right, within the center of the Cahill district, that is guided for industrial use, or within the comprehensive plan. But the zoning is the same. So the uses that we're talking about here would be allowed in that area as well as here. That is true.
But what I am trying to get at is if we could go to the language that you have included for the potential change. And I do really appreciate how many cities do have fire stations in their industrial zones. I think that makes a lot of sense. However, we're not just asking to put in a fire station. We are saying that we could have administrative offices, libraries, cultural institutions, and all of that throughout the industrial zone. And that could be places that generate a huge amount of traffic. And in the Cahill district plan, and they were talking about that industrial core that's supposed to stay industrial. One of the concerns that people had is that there was too much traffic that was coming in from the restaurants and all of that. And so I really think this is an excellent opportunity for honing our skills in rezoning according to the comprehensive plan and community feedback. It doesn't make sense to say that you could do all of that in the Cahill plan where it's supposed to stay industrial.
That is another possibility.
Having said that, I'd be okay for the Cahill plan industrial to say fire stations can go anywhere in the industrial zone. I'd be okay with that. But all this other stuff, I'm not okay with that being allowed throughout the industrial zone.
Yeah, so a couple of responses to that. The quick fix to that concern is we don't have to adopt this language. It could just simply state fire stations. The second piece of that, it is a possibility to create a second industrial type zoning district within the Cahill district. Yeah, that could be a item for consideration for the Planning Commission.
Member Risser, did you have a segue before I go to Member Pierce?
That was my biggest concern.
Okay. Right. Member Pierce.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just had a follow-up on Member Risser's suggestion. What are the cons of doing that, of just changing it to just say fire stations?
Thinking about if the council were of the opinion to turn this into a civic campus, the entire 8 acres, these types of uses would be permitted on the South Ave. If we just did fire station, they would not. Otherwise, really what we did is just take the same language that's in the code and move it here.
Then was the additional uses here, then were we just trying to project what the rest of that space could be developed as? Is that why we have places of assembly? Like, I get administrative offices, libraries, public safety buildings like that. I kind of get. We talked about those types of uses. The places of assembly, that makes me think of churches, but maybe that's not. Maybe I shouldn't think about it that way. Maybe it's more general.
Yeah, and they are allowed in the industrial district as a conditional use now. So yeah, this language we could do some creative editing.
Okay, thank you.
Well, that's an interesting point that Member Pierce raised, and it depends on how you read this language as to what it modifies. On the face of it, you could argue that it's got to be a publicly owned and operated civic or cultural institution, including but not limited to, and then you name all those things that would be publicly owned or operated as a civic facility, and then it says, and places of assembly. You could interpret that to mean it's got to be a public-owned place of assembly, like we're attaching to the fire station or proposing to do, but it's freestanding.
Yep.
Or you could say, well, it's a church, but a church could already come in there. We've got one down in the commercial industrial district right off 494 and what is that? East Bush Lake Road, sitting down in the commercial industrial district. There's a big, I think, evangelical church down there. So anyway, other comments. Member Agnew wanted to ask a few questions.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I want to talk a little bit about the parking that's included in here. And I know in previous reviews, we've talked about how much parking there is, and I think that the report that we got in our traffic and parking study suggested that there were 14 additional stalls over what they were projecting as peak need, which is about 15% more parking than would be needed. And I know that parking is expensive to create and maintain, and so I'm curious what's driving that 15% increase over what we project we'll need.
Yeah, it could be that community space. I think there's been talk of potentially this being a voting station, so it's providing enough parking to cover the uses that have been contemplated there.
And those were items that weren't discussed or influenced for the parking study that was done?
Yep, Mr. Terhar is on the call, so maybe he can talk. You know, I know we talked about all the different uses that could go into that building. If Mr. Terhar could comment on that.
Yeah, and I'll even repeat the question just to be a little bit more articulate with that. What uses in projecting the parking needed for this site were considered, and were things like voting considered in forecasting what that peak demand would be?
For the peak demand, we assume there would be 36 employees and visitors for the fire and public health offices and 40 visitors for the community space on a typical weekday. So that was we're trying to look for a typical workday, weekday. We're not looking at special events under this particular situation. And we assumed one person per vehicle, so no carpooling, kind of a worst case scenario. And under that scenario, that's where we get the 76 spaces. So if there's special events or, other things that are happening, there would need to be some sort of a plan probably in place if there's, if you expect additional demand during those times.
Thank you. And also, just to build on that, I drive on the street literally every day because my daughters go to daycare there. Is there parking allowed on 76th Street anywhere?
I don't believe there is. No.
Okay.
No, I don't believe there is. It's a 4-lane undivided street. Yeah, and I'm looking at Street View, and there's no parking signs on both sides.
Okay, thank you. And then I think that the other part, and I thought it was really interesting, I'm thinking about the signage now, and I like tying it back to a very specific pain point that we've experienced as a city of wayfinding and kind of recognition of other public buildings being a pain point or something that we've received feedback on. So I appreciate seeing improvements and intentionality around that. The twos in particular, I'm thinking like the really big green twos. Can you tell me a little bit more about what the significance for that is meant to be? I'm thinking of maybe me pre-city council, I wouldn't know fire station number 2 versus fire station 1 versus 3. And so I don't understand the need to put 2 as the prominent focal point as opposed to just Edina Fire, as an example.
Yeah, I might ask the architect to they've talked about that as being an architectural element to identify the building as Fire Station 2, but I believe Trace is online with us, or the chief.
Yeah. Hi, this is Trace Schuck, talking remotely here. The use of large numbers on fire stations is a fairly common, iconic feature on fire stations in general across the country and actually around the world. Quite oftentimes they're handled in a rather artistic manner and rather creative manner. So it has more to do with building typology. There's been suggestion that the green sort of reflected Edina, Edina's green color signature. But oftentimes they're red because that's the more commonly associated color with fire stations in general. But again, it's more of a standard type of identifying element on fire stations in general that sources that direction.
Chief, you wanted to add something?
Yeah, thank you, Councilmember Agnew. That I was just going to follow up with what Trace said. This is really the iconic fire station look that we were trying to go for, where we were that tower being high above the building, so that if you were looking out, seeing and kind of guiding you into where Fire Station 2 would be. I do understand that people may not even know where, if we have a Station 3, 4, 5, or 6, but that is just that identifier for that specific fire station. Wayfinding was important for us and very purposeful. I think Councilmember Pierce shared a story about his own family member that didn't know there was a fire station across the street. And so that was intentional with us, intentional with the design to really make that a proud building that people would know is a fire station and know that that's that community landmark that they could go for to help.
Thank you. And I didn't realize that having large numbers was something of a fire station monument or recognition. I would be curious of like, what is number 2? Like if I'm looking for a fire station, I wouldn't know that 2 was the fire station, but maybe that's just me. So thank you for the additional context on that. And those are all the questions that I had.
Thank you. Member Jackson, I don't have anything either at this point in time. This is a public hearing. We're going to open it up for public testimony. And is there anyone in the audience that wishes to come forward and testify regarding this matter? Ms. Weston,
Hello
welcome
again.
back up to the podium.
Okay, Janie Weston, 6136 Brookview Avenue. I do agree with Councilperson Risser about having many different types of public-oriented buildings being allowed in PID zoning. And I do think it should be more focused to the fire department and public health at part of that building. So why couldn't there be a sub-district that specifically is for that? For instance, a PID-FPH, fire and public health, or something like that. Why can't we have a zoning that is very specific like that? And also, as far as the signage goes, I think the more visible it is on the front as well as the sides, the better it is for public safety. For anyone that's driving by in either direction, you want to know that that is the fire station. Because if a fire rig, especially a big long one, needs to come out of there in a big hurry, if you've got a little visual heads up, oh, there's a fire station up ahead here, be more aware. I think that's just plain good sense to do that. And I hope if it's going to have a 2, it has a hashtag number, something to indicate number 2, because then you know there's another fire station somewhere. So, thank you.
Very good. Thanks, Ms. Wesson. Anyone else in the audience wish to testify? All right, let's turn to people that might be listening in virtually.
I do still have a caller on the line, but the caller is not signaling a desire to speak. As a reminder, if you'd like to provide testimony in this public hearing, once you're connected, press star 1 on your telephone keypad. That will get you into the queue to speak. That's the asterisk symbol, then the number 1, not the pound sign, as that will take you out of the queue. I am still not seeing anyone signal, so I think it's safe for you to go forward.
All right. Staff is suggesting, Director Teague is suggesting that has been our practice to keep the matter open until noon on September 25th, 2023 for further public input in writing or telephone calls to City Hall, and then continue the matter to our October 3rd, 2023 meeting. So is there a motion to close the public hearing at noon on September 25th, 2023 and continue the action to October 3rd, 2023?
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Member Pierce, second by Member Jackson to adopt the motion as stated. Any further discussion? All those in favor of adoption of the motion as stated say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Carried. All right, that completes the public hearing portion of the agenda this evening. And now we're going to move on to the reports and recommendations section of the agenda. We've got some interesting matters here. The first matter, of course, we have some donations from the generous folks in our community that we need to deal with usually every meeting. And this resolution is entitled 2023-61. Is there a motion to adopt 2023-61?
So moved. Second.
Member Jackson moves and Member Agnew seconds the adoption of Resolution 2023-61, accepting donations on behalf of the City of Edina. Any further discussion? All those in favor of adoption of Resolution 2023-61 say aye. Aye. Opposed? Carried. And this reporting period at the council, we have some Park and Rec donations and then Braemar Golf Course donation. Park and Rec, Paul Peters, $3,200 for a bench at Lewis Park. Thank you, Mr. Peters. Bert and Carol Gwinney, $3,200 for a bench at Bredesen Park. And William Davis, 4 trees at Roslyn Park, total expenditure, total gift, $1,400. And then Pacey Erk, who lives at Braemar Golf Course, who gave a donation to the Braemar Memorial Fund over and above that clock, that beautiful clock out there that she donated. And this is a $500 donation. Those names of those donors will all be on our website. So let's move on to the matter B, and that is an Art and Culture Commission report and recommendation with regard to something called an art grants program in the City of Edina. And we have Perry Vetter, our Park and Rec Director, with us, and Jen Faith, our Art and Culture Commission Chair. And looking forward to hearing your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, council members. And Mayor, I echo your comments on those wonderful donations. So we truly appreciate those philanthropic efforts in our community. This evening, I'd like to introduce Arts and Culture Commissioner Jen Faith. She will overview the work plan initiative that the Arts and Culture Commission undertook. Commissioner Faith led that initiative along with Commissioners Curtin, and also in the audience this evening is our Vice Chair of the Commission, Sabaran. So with that, I will turn it over to her and she will highlight and go over their work plan initiative to develop an arts grant program in the City of Edina.
Thank you, Director Vetter. Well, welcome, Commissioner.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your time tonight, Mr. Mayor and council members. I'm here to talk about the Arts and Culture Commission Initiative 1.1.7 from our 2023 work plan, which is the development of a community-driven arts and culture microgrant program. Specifically, I want to focus on 3 different areas tonight: a bit of background and how we got to this point, how the program ties into the 2018 Edina Comprehensive Plan, and some highlights of the program elements. So this past February, you accepted our 2022 Work Plan Initiative report, which was to research and make a recommendation on a microgrant process for a community-driven arts and culture within Edina. As a result of council acceptance early this year, we added a new initiative to our 2023 work plan, which was to develop the microgrant program for presentation and review by City Council for approval. And as you likely recall, we presented our initial program design thoughts to you during our joint session this past April as we began development of the program, and we appreciated your feedback on how to make the program effective and equitable. This past summer, our commission finalized guidelines for the development of the program, working in collaboration with staff to sketch out the design elements, and we voted as a commission in July to approve the Art Grant program for your review and presentation tonight. Next, I'd like to talk about how the program connects to the Edina Comprehensive Plan. The Art Grant program was designed to create an equitable and easily accessible opportunity for Minnesota residents to request city resources in order to support and facilitate arts and culture activities within Edina. And we are focusing on 3 of the goals that were developed in the 2018 Edina Comprehensive Plan. Goal number 1 is to provide opportunities for people to come together in the creation and celebration of art and culture, building inclusive communities. Goal number 3 of that plan is to activate community spaces with dynamic programming that includes a broad array of art forms and expressions that are accessible to all. And lastly, goal number 5 of the 2018 plan was to establish a formal role for artists and other creative thinkers to participate in forward-looking plans for Edina. So through the Art Grant program, We're looking to build arts and culture in Edina organically through ideas, as the comprehensive plan states, to weave creative expression into the fabric of our community. And from our research, we found many community microgrant programs throughout the United States with common themes of community building, trust and belonging, a celebration of diversity, wellness promotion, and community connection. And it's been our goal to achieve these themes in our program. Finally, I would like to provide a brief overview of the Art Grant program. If approved, the program would incorporate the following elements in its design. The program's purpose and priorities are based on the 2018 Edina Comprehensive Plan goals, as I just outlined. Eligibility requirements would require that all applicants be Minnesota residents. And as I stated earlier, to be awarded an art grant would require that the proposal provides benefit to Edina residents and be publicly accessible. Proposals could encompass a variety of artistic disciplines in a range of different formats, including but not limited to visual arts, performing arts, literary arts, culturally based arts, and arts integrated technology program. So the ideas are endless. We propose funding limits of $1,000 per grant and have outlined what the funding may or may not be used for. And the guidelines report you received outlines those different requirements. City resources would include that funding, but also access to city space, required permits, or other city resources that might otherwise prevent someone from artistic or cultural opportunities. And as part of the proposal review process, the Arts and Culture Commission would review all submissions and select winners in accordance with a defined set of criteria. And we would be utilizing the City of Edina Art and Decor rubric and the City Handbook Values Viewfinder. It's our goal for all proposals to be individually evaluated and given numerical scores in addition to narrative comments, to ensure equity and fairness in the evaluation process. And if you approve this initiatives will work with staff to finalize what those criteria would look like. Lastly, we have also outlined a process for award notification, implementation, and the need for a marketing strategy, partnering with staff to ensure equal access for the program. So just to wrap up, I just want to recognize a few people. This effort could not have been completed without a lot of collaboration. So I'd like to recognize Ann Curtin, my fellow Arts and Culture Commissioner, who worked with me on this initiative, our Arts and Culture Commission Chair, Laura Westland, and the entire Commission for their feedback, suggestions, and work bringing the initiative to this point. Commission liaisons Laura Fulton and Perry Vetter, who provided valuable perspective throughout the process and put up with my many, many questions. And finally, past Chair Rebecca Sorensen and Steve Succo, a former Arts and Culture Commissioner, who championed the idea and laid the foundation for this program. So with that, thank you all for your time tonight. I'd be happy to answer any questions. And the Arts and Culture Commission asks you for your support of Initiative 1.1.7, the Edina Art Grant Program for implementation.
All right, Commissioner Faith, thanks for that presentation. Let me check with my colleagues to see if anybody has any questions for you. Stand by here, and Director Vetter may be somebody that somebody wants to visit with as well, but let's have you stand up here for now. Anybody have questions for Commissioner Faith? Member Risser?
It's very comprehensive, and I'm impressed. The only thing that kind of popped out under project feasibility, since it's a $1,000 micro grant, the applicant track record in promoting and completing previous programs. I'm kind of wondering if that's going to be something that could be a barrier to kind of upcoming artists. Anyway, I just wanted, that was the only thing that kind of
thank you for your question. I agree, and we did discuss that as a commission, weighing the the idea of having some experience, and we want that to be built into the criteria for the evaluation. So while an applicant may not have as much background in the arts, they might score higher in other areas. So we want to be able to create some flexibility around that. I appreciate your feedback.
Member Agnew also has a question for you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And it's funny, my eyes went right to the rubric as well. And again, super comprehensive, and it's amazing to see. I remember our first preview of this at the work session, and I love seeing how this has come together. I'm curious, maybe at kind of a macro level against the rubric, how you're thinking about it. And maybe a lot of it really depends on how many applicants come in. But for some of these, and I'll just pick one, the last one on the list, accurate depiction of culture and history of Edina and or BIPOC groups, something like that. I'm guessing there's a little bit of, some are zeros, and that might rule some projects out, whereas others are like purely points, and maybe it'll be stacked rank. So maybe holistically, how are you thinking about the rubric and how it'll be implemented?
Yeah, thank you for your question. We want to incorporate that piece. The city has created that, so it is important to us that be part of our criteria. You probably noticed in your packet that the guidelines outlines it's kind of a 40-point scale of lots of different criteria, so that would be part of it. And that 40-point scale really is just a starting point for us. So should you decide to implement this, our next project would be to work with staff to come up with what exactly that criteria would look like, so that certain groups or individuals aren't just automatically ruled out because they can't, score enough in one particular area. So it's a task ahead of us, and we recognize that as a commission, but we also feel that it's important to do that for this initiatives and arguably for lots of our initiatives going forward.
Thank you. And I love even just the framework of it in seeing what's important and how are you thinking about it, even if it does go through some iterations. I think it's a really good way of carrying through the goals that you have to how you're evaluating each of the projects. So again, thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Faith, I see at least one of your other fellow commissioners here, and maybe you want to introduce them and just have them stand up. And
Yeah, so we have Ann Curtin and Alana Zabaran.
Thank
Alana
you.
is our
Commissioners,
vice
welcome.
chair.
Thanks for being here. And a former commissioner, Mr. Rubin. Thank you,
Russ
Mr. Rubin, for being here as well. All right. You want to comment?
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead. Member
Thank
Jackson.
you. Okay. Oh, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you so much. This is fantastic. The quality of work that went in, the idea was brilliant in the first place. And so thanks for remembering that we all stand on someone else's shoulders when we go forward. But the work done in this was magnificent. So it really is a great way. And one of the things we were talking about budget upstairs, and we're going to talk about that later, and we're really concerned with public safety. And the ability to express ourselves through the arts and build community is such an important part of having ownership in where we live. And when you have an ownership interest in where you live, you feel welcomed, you are much less likely to commit crimes against the people around you. So in addition to the wonderful work and the thorough work and the really inspiring work that you've done, you're also helping our public safety. So I want to thank you all and thank your team, and I'm really pleased to see this come forward. Thank you.
Thank you for those comments.
Director Vetter, before I ask for a motion, is there anything else you wanted to add?
Just Mayor and Council, just also a thank you to the Commission for their work on this. As a staff liaison, it's always appreciative of the Commission members when they are going out and doing that work and coming back with their research. And the questions and the research that they did on this work was very impressive. And I think to Councilmember Agnew's question, it's really trying to put those qualitative applications into a quantitative measurement, right? So I think that allows the commission members to have that ability to go from a quality statement of that application of what art and what that grant request could be into measuring it and then implementing it. So it's fantastic.
Yeah, good. Thanks. Is there a motion to direct staff to implement a arts micro grant program for the city of Edina consistent with what's been recommended by the Art and Culture Commission in their guidelines and elements for such a program?
So moved.
Seconded.
Get a motion by Member Jackson, second by Member Risser to direct staff to implement an arts micro grant program for the city of Edina consistent with those guidelines and elements recommended by the Art and Culture Commission for such a program. Any further discussion? All those in favor of adoption of the motion as stated, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Carried. Very good. Thanks for being with us this evening. Thank you, commissioners. Former commissioner. Good to see you, Mr. Rubin. All right, now we're on to something arts related. We've got a potential letter of intent, an LOI with Hennepin County to talk about in terms of potentially co-locating an Edina Arts Center with the Southdale Public Library project that the county is working on. So I'm going to turn now to Perry Vetter again to lead us through this process to date and discuss this letter of intent.
Thank you again, Mayor and council members. I'd like to also just recognize again for the Arts and Culture Commission members that have been diligently bringing this community perspective to our process. As an advisory commission, that has been one of their tasks for a very long time. Not only current commissioners, but past commissioners as well, keeping the goal of an active and vibrant art space in Edina to the forefront. So I'd like to continue to thank them and also some of our city staff. Assistant Director Tracy Peterson is here this evening, and Laura Fulton, our Recreation Supervisor for the Arts, who couldn't be here tonight. Also wanted to thank them for their efforts, as well as Jeanette Colby, who works in our arts programs as well. So this evening we are asking for your review of a letter of intent, an LOI, with Hennepin County Libraries for the co-location of the Edina Arts Center. Just a quick introduction on that. Hennepin County is planning to rebuild the Southdale Library on the current location, 7001 York Avenue, on the existing site. They have inquired with the City of Edina, as you know, about the ability and desire to co-locate the Edina Arts Center within the Hennepin County Library. Typically, when we kind of talk about a project of this magnitude, as I've mentioned earlier, we kind of always ask someone, do you want a quick no or a long yes? And Hennepin County desires a quick no or a quick yes. So their project has been ongoing. So just a little bit about the history of the Southdale Library redevelopment. Just wanted to caveat this with I'm not representing Hennepin County this evening. I'm just recapping some of the public information that they shared just a few weeks ago at the end of August at their community open house. And I'm actually going to just turn this monitor. Hopefully not break it. So just a little bit about their redevelopment process. So those of you that are interested, in 1971 they began construction on that facility and opened in late 1973. Over decades of operations, in 2015 they decided they wanted to move their service center and their courts and then work on replacing the library. That kicked off a number of planning exercises. In 2016 they did relocate the service center to the Southdale Mall. And then from 2016 through 2018, they led public meetings on the functionality and adjacent site uses. In 2019, they did move court operations, which was the third phase of their operations out of their regional service center. And then in 19 and 20, they did some additional planning. Would they relocate into the Southdale Mall? And then in 2020, as you'll see from some later slides, a lot of planning and operational efforts were interrupted by the pandemic. In 2022, they did make the decision that they wanted to rebuild the Southdale Library on that existing site, and now they have begun the planning and design for the new Southdale Library. Again, just a caveat, I'm not representing them, but they did hold a community house on August 31st. City of Edina staff was a part of that presentation that evening. So their proposal specifically is around building an approximately 45,000 square foot library on that existing parcel. They have two large goals. One is to improve access and accessibility, so thinking of their physical building, the location, and the features of their site. And sustainability is a large priority for the Hennepin County staff on this. They have their Hennepin County Climate Action Plan, they want to follow Minnesota B3, and they have a sustainable landscape guideline. One of the main portions that you will hear later when they do come in for their separate land use reviews is about addressing the 100-year floodplain through some stormwater strategies for the site. And again, I just want to reiterate that this is about the co-location of the library. Hennepin County does plan on bringing the land use application through the formal process later this year. So what we are kind of asking tonight is really on that timing and intent on co-location. This is a graphic provided by Hennepin County, and it just kind of gives you a little bit of a bird's eye perspective on where we're talking and some of the uses around it. In the center is the orange, highlights the existing Southdale Library site. In the purple is the 9-mile regional trail connector that typically runs kind of on that west to east, east to west trajectory, and then some of the local green spaces and park uses within the area and how those kind of interconnect within there. Specifically highlighting some City of Edina parks, especially the connection between Centennial Lakes and the Promenade, as well as the City of Richfield's Adams Hill Park. Hennepin County has identified a 5-step project schedule from concept to design, which they are currently in right now, the very beginning phases of this project, to schematic, design development, and construction documents, then eventually construction and move-in. They are looking for occupation potentially end of 2026 into 2027 to kind of give you an idea of the time frame of this. As I mentioned, they are currently in concept design. They are moving next into schematic design, and that's why we are here this evening to talk to you about this intent for the co-location, so they can kind of begin into a little bit more detail of that planning. So how does that connect with the Edina Arts Center? So a brief history of the Edina Arts Center. Portions of that building started in 1948 when the Miller family, Lee and Ross, built their home on that location and eventually sold the property in 1976 to the City of Edina. The next year, the Edina Arts Center opened in that location. There were 2 expansions, 1990 and 1997. The final one in 1997 added the final square footage, which gets us to its current size, which is about 10,000 square feet. There have been a series of studies and analysis, and then a repeat study and analysis that have occurred over time. Beginning in 2007, a feasibility study and building code study was done. The work did not move forward at that time. In 2016, planning for a larger arts facility was conducted in the Grandview area. That work was undertaken. That work did not move forward. When I arrived in 2019, concerning about the building structure itself, conducted an architectural analysis, and it kind of found there were several building code deficiencies, primarily in the pottery area, related to that structure. Again, we didn't put it on what happened in 2020, but primarily that was a difficult year for access to recreational facilities and bringing people together. So in 2021, the Arts Center did reopen. However, we made the decision to keep the pottery portion of the lower level closed because of the building conditions and the code aspects. But the main floor does operate currently now for just pre-registered programs that we are offering through our recreation activities directory catalog. So in 2021 and 2022, we completed a pottery forward study We'll talk about that next. And then on the heels of that, we did a space planning exercise as well. The Pottery Forward study and the space planning exercise were in conjunction with the Arts and Culture Commission members. They continue to bring that community perspective to our planning process. And then in 2023, as you know, the co-location idea with Hennepin County Libraries was identified. So some of the recent studies, not to go back to the 07 or 16, but in 2019 we did do that architectural and building analysis, and that was primarily around building codes that obviously have evolved since that facility came online in 76 and since then. So think about things of how gas line are penetrated through walls and into the center, how electrical distribution requirements have changed, how space needs for kilns and adequate circulation around them have changed. So that's why it was primarily the Pottery Center, and that's why we're currently using that main floor only. In 2021 and into 2022, we completed the Pottery Forward study, as we called it. And that was a very deep dive into the operational analysis of the Art Center, not just the ceramics and the three-dimensional portion of it, but all of our programs, really identifying who our users were, where they were coming from, how the revenues and expenses, the class offerings, a very deep dive in that study. We worked with the Arts and Culture Commission on that and actually had a work session with council. While that did not result in a definitive direction or action on that, the council did give us really good feedback on the idea of decentralizing the arts or splitting off pottery from other two-dimensional aspects of art creation was not ideal, and kind of challenged staff to go back and look to say is what could that be? What could it be in a new facility? What could it be in a retrofitted facility? There was even comments on, what could the best art center in the upper Midwest look like, right? So we kind of used that as a taking off point, and then in 2022 and into 2023, we went back and we did a space planning exercise, and we really approached that looking at all the work that had been done in past studies, all the way back to the Grandview study about size of room, scope of room, types of use. And we kind of modeled it around small building blocks. And if you keep adding up those building blocks for what you need, each type of use has a square footage size, each type of use has a square footage cost. So how could we model different scenarios? And that's kind of what we looked at. And it really came down to kind of a pottery-only center, which we know wasn't ideal, to a full art center. Where we kept getting hung up was the difference in what we found between a net square footage and a gross square footage, which was that net, which was what you're actually using, and the gross square footage, which was how much space do you need for stairwells and elevator shafts and utility rooms and storage rooms and all the stuff that didn't result in the end use of art use, but it was required for a facility. So that's where we kind of kept getting hung up, and how do we overcome this obstacle when the conversation started on co-location? So that was the inquiry from Hennepin County, is do we want to collate the Art Center into the new Southdale Library, increasing that project square footage? And where we came up with it is really what's that value to the process. And when we started working with Hennepin County, it really was opportune time. Had this occurred a year ago, we would not have had that background level of information on space planning to help to bring to this process. We would have been light years behind where their process is. So when we looked at what we wanted to have included in that, the two-dimensional art, the three-dimensional art, advents of technology and maker spaces and 3D printing of, where's the next level of art going to? We really looked at kind of where is that value, and we kind of found it in three things, and it was our shared infrastructure, partnerships ability, and kind of the user exposure and awareness. Hennepin County, I think this is their fourth busiest library in their system. That number of visits bodes well for us to be have eyes on our operations that might be potential residents that join our programs or non-residents that join our programs. It could be our neighbors to the east in the city of Richfield that want to join our programs. So Hennepin County kind of took it a little bit further at that time and really laid out what they needed from a facility, which is the white with black text bubbles, and what the Edina Arts Center, what we identified on the right side. And that was really on the far sides is the unique aspects of each operations. And in the center, when you kind of narrow those things down, you really get into those things that really were obstacles for us looking at our own facility, and that's things like vertical circulation, restrooms, wellness areas, custodial areas, trash and recycling, all the things you need in a building that you don't want to really have to pay for, right? Or at least on your own. And finding out that really the ability to collate helps share that infrastructure, really. And if you kind of take that off the page, then you look at the next set and say, now there are those pieces of a strong partnership that we could work together on. So here we are tonight, asking you to kind of review and look at a letter of intent. And this is a non-binding letter of intent. Really, it starts laying out where we would end up going on a future agreement. So it sets that structure for negotiations, for future approvals. Where we would be on this is when it comes to the overall structure, we would be a tenant inside the Hennepin County Library. They would retain ownership of the parcel and the buildings. They would be the primary designer of that building, as I indicated. They'll be coming through for land use. When it came to the ownership, we would not have any of that. We could structure it as a 20-year lease with, I believe we talked about 2 10-year renewal options as well. We would have the ability to input and collaborate on their architecture. They would be, when it came to the Arts Center specific things, we would be the primary of that. They would kind of have that overall project oversight on how that fits in. As far as the cost structure, we would pay a tenant annual square footage rent. We would not be responsible for roof repairs, siding repairs, window repairs, long into the future. We would be a tenant responsible for our own furniture, fixtures, and equipment. What is a little bit unique in this as well is that Hennepin County has looked at the remaining portions of the site as green space. That is where they're headed now. We would be an input and collaborate on that aspect of it, and they would be kind of that primary designer and still retain ownership. What's unique is Hennepin County doesn't manage outdoor spaces, but we do. So there would be that aspect of they would be internally operating and we could operate the external. And really where our conversations have been right now is that that green space could be used as an extension of the library and art functions. So thinking about activity areas, educational areas, public art, programming for each of our classes, et cetera. Really an outdoor extension of the indoor facility. So as far as size, we would be around 18,000 square feet, which was right around where we were on our space planning. That would include 2-dimensional art, 3-dimensional art. They are more than open and understand the nuances of the ceramics operation with kilns and ventilation, as well as the ability to have discussions around outdoor kilns as well, which was a very important driver of our current operation as well. So this kind of does continue to support, as our commissioners member this evening, kind of that comprehensive guide plan aspect for art in Edina and really that quality of life related to it. So really we're requesting for you to review that letter of intent this evening, and if acceptable, kind of continue to negotiate into this agreement. And again, we're kind of at a opportune time for this process. Hennepin County is looking for that quick no or quick yes because they have a lot of work to do on their planning process. So with that, that's the end of my presentation.
All right, very good. Questions for Director Vetter on the LOI? Commissioner. Councilmember Jackson.
Yes, thank you. This might be for Ms. Peterson.
It was already at the next meeting.
And that's about the terms of the lease, the 20 years plus the 10 plus the 10. And thinking about our use of the Art Center, are we comfortable with that?
Councilmember Jackson, we are. And we're thinking, that would be that 40-year life cycle. And that's a long time for a public facility of this area. I know we've talked about these were structured or built in the 70s. So we're approaching, that 50. And Both of our facilities are probably overdue by about 10 years, so that would get us about 40 years of use. And really, that 20-year portion would really get us grounded. It's not too long and it's not too short where we're worried about, is it 3 years and we're out, or 4 years and we have to decide, are we going to renew or not? It really gives us a grounding time to be involved and really start reestablishing some of our programs in the community.
Okay, excellent. And then the other question is about operating the green space. What are the budgetary impacts of that, and what's your comfort level with that?
Those are things we would have to move into the next phase of and really start understanding, along with not only the need for probably our architectural services to help refine our space as well, but putting together operational plans and business plans for those operations and discussing how that impacts, how that would be structured. In your staff report for this evening, I didn't mention it tonight, but we do have kind of a similar arrangement at the Grandview Library as well. Different structure on the ownership operations of that, but we really, at the end of the year, do a true-up where Hennepin County does some of the primary building improvements, the facilities division does some of the secondary, and then our operations are external. And then we kind of do a balance and true-up at the end of the year. So that might be where we try to negotiate and head as well.
Okay, but where we're at right now, you're comfortable with?
Where we're comfortable right now,
okay.
Yes.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Thank
And we
you.
are looking again about being online in 2026, 2027.
Okay.
Member Pearson and Member Risser.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So just a couple of questions, and more just curious about this. So in the LOI, we are essentially a tenant. So when we start talking about things like approvals for land use and the sketch plan review approvals, so how does that work? Are there two bodies that essentially give feedback on the sketch plan review? So just kind of talk through how that would work.
Thank you, Councilmember Pierce. I'm going to actually phone a friend and ask our community development director on how that may occur. The reason why I love Parks and Recreation is it does not have a land use component very often. So if you want to see gray hairs pop, it'll be around variances and setback requirements about that. But maybe Director T can talk to you about the process that could come forward in the land use.
Yes, thank you, members of council. I've had some conversations with the Hennepin County staff. So they would be the primary applicant. We would be reviewing that land use application. As you normally do, we would just be a tenant within the building. They've indicated coming in for some type of a sketch plan later this year. So they're intending on designing both the library and our tenant space, as well as the entire site plan. So we would have a chance to review that on a sketch plan basis. This property is zoned R1, and these uses, similar to that language that you saw on the screen, it was a conditionally permitted use of the library, public type uses. It's that same provision that's regulating this, only through a conditional use permit.
And Councilmember Pierce, nothing in the LOI would require a land use approval. So that would be, the approval would be on its own set of standards, sure. And there would be no triggers because of the letter of intent that anything would be assumed or given.
Okay. I've not done a ton of LOIs, but for us to say it's non-binding, when you read through there, I mean, there's a fair amount of specificity in there for it to be non-binding, but I get it. So I was just curious about that. And then I've spent quite a bit of time in that library of late, and so it surprises me that it opened when I was 4. So there's a lot of potential in that spot too for green space and to utilize that space in a creative way. So I'm very excited about it and look forward to next steps.
Thank you. Member Risser.
I think it's a wonderful idea, and I agree with Member Pierce that there is so much that could happen in that green space. And, you just start thinking Edina Garden Council, could there be some kind of collaboration? Could there be a community garden? Just sculptures, all that kind of good stuff. I have no problem with the LOI, although I did see one little typo, but I don't know if, now is the time to talk about that. But that's it. I mean, it's good. So
We'll fix that.
Yep.
Member Agnew, anything?
I'm sure. I guess really excited to see this come together. I was excited when the idea first came, and also appreciate, I know, the role that Member Jackson played in really planting some of those early seeds too. I think this is an amazing collaboration. I am very comfortable with this, knowing that it's non-binding, it's allowing us to move forward, but I can't wait to see this project come to fruition. So, thank you.
I have some comments, but do you have questions?
Yeah, there were some suggestions. So I've had quite a bit of experience with LOIs, and to the extent, they are non-binding, but you try to provide as much specificity as you can, and I think some of the rates they look very favorable to us relative to what we spend now or what we used to spend on the Art Center. I think it looks good that way. On the 2 10-year extensions, I'd like to see us think about negotiating for a predetermined rate of increase, just like they did with operating expenses capped at 2.5%. So think about rate of inflation or 2.5%, whichever's less, so that when you make that transition from the year 20 to year 21, you've got your whole rent schedule, your whole rent table figured out. And it's all part of the deal that you can negotiate. The other issue that I saw was that gave me a little bit of pause was the potential assessment of $500,000 in design fees to us in a building that they're going to primarily occupy, and they're going to turn over a shell to us on the second floor. And so it makes me wonder about whether that's a fair allocation for design fees. But maybe that could be adjusted in some way or balanced against us operating that green space. I'm just not sure about that, but there could be some give and take in there. The other thing with respect to, and I don't think it would hurt to put this in the LOI, I see we're going to the second floor, right? So if you go to the city of Bloomington or Bloomington City Hall and you see the art space on the north side of the building, when you walk in that, what would that be, the northeast corner of the building, and you hit the auditorium, but then there's a gallery space. So it strikes me that this might be a little bit too detailed for right now in the LOI, but there should be some kind of appropriate transition for taking people upstairs. So I'm thinking you're going to have your elevator, you're going to have your freight elevator, but there should be some kind of a grand transition, I think, up to that second floor to our art space if this works out. And then on the first floor, there's some sort of transition space that lets people know what's going on upstairs, so people, or maybe it's a gallery, or there's public art there in some form or fashion. But those are design elements and downstream, but still those would be things that we'd want to negotiate, and maybe that justifies us paying more of a design fee, a greater portion of the design fee, but I'm still not sure 500,000 is a fair allocation of the design fee, but I leave that to your negotiating skills. Those are the two observations that I had that were kind of right off the top of my head. And Member Jackson has a comment I think she wants to make.
I do, and I see former Commissioner Rubin in the audience, and this came about because of his persistence and the persistence of the arts community in Edina. will be out working in my yard, and Russ Rubin walks by and says, "Where are we at the Art Center? Are we going to get an Art Center in Edina?" And I have heard that over and over and over again, so it's always front of mind with me because it's not able to be put into long-term memory. And so I wanted to acknowledge the persistence of our community in seeking this. It is a really important part of it, and I love the synergy. It's a great location, and it's a great co-location. And so, but I want to say thank you so much for your persistence and your patience with us as we work through this. So, and thank you, Director Vetter, for working with the county, and the enthusiasm on both sides has really been fun to see. So, thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Member Risser, you want to catch that typo right now?
I did talk about that.
Okay, you got it.
So I'm good.
Okay. Anything else right now?
I just really, really love this idea, and I really hope that there's nothing in here about our transparency requirements and our first floor height requirements, and I really hope that doesn't come back down the road, because, I think you got to think about function, and it might not be appropriate. So I just hope that's not a little bump that ends up coming along.
Okay. Anybody else have anything? All right. So what you would like is a motion to authorize you to negotiate and execute a letter of intent consistent with the letter of intent that we've seen proposed by the county, and negotiate relevant project agreements for city council approval. Is that correct?
That is correct, Mayor. Thank you.
All right. Is there a motion to that effect?
So moved.
Member Jackson moves. Member Pierce seconds that motion as stated. Any further discussion? All those in favor of adoption of the motion as stated, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried.
Thank you very much.
Big night. Yeah,
Appreciate
folks. Pretty exciting. All right. You want to stick around for something really exciting?
Yeah.
Stick around for the tax levy conversation.
Russ, stick around for the budget.
We can nerve gas you in about 5 minutes here. All right. We are now going to move on to the potential adoption of the proposed budget on a preliminary basis and establish a potential tax levy payable in 24. There's a resolution that accompanies this preliminary approval of the tax levy, and Manager Neal has this matter, and Alicia McAndrews, our finance director, is available virtually, and she'll be standing by for questions that are appropriate for her. Manager Neal.
Thank you, Your Honor, and members of council. This evening is an important event in the life of a budget. In Minnesota, city councils are asked to certify a preliminary tax levy about this time of year, about this time every year. And what that means is that you are establishing the maximum property tax levy that the city will have the opportunity to certify for the upcoming budget year. Which schools will do the same thing, counties will do the same thing. Then the counties will aggregate that information for taxpayers. They'll produce a tax notice, and that tax notice will be going out to residents sometime in mid-November. And that gives them, and it also gives us, the full picture of how our taxing and spending decisions impact people based on the value of their property. So we have been working, staff and council have been working on a proposal, a couple of proposals actually, throughout the year. And tonight I'm pleased to present this to you this evening. And as you noted, Mr. Mayor, our finance director, Alicia McAndrews, will be kind of in the virtual world tonight, and we'll chime in if we have any questions for her. She's also driving the PowerPoint, so if you would like to put that up now, we will begin. Very good. This is our agenda for tonight. We'll go through the budget. We'll talk a little bit about process and timeline. I've already done some of that. Community impact of our investments, and this is where we talk to you about what is the outcomes, what are the outcomes that we are achieving with our budget. We'll talk about tax tax impact on median value homes. We'll do some comparison between Edina and some of our neighbors. We'll talk a little bit about next steps, and then we'll be happy to answer any questions. This is our 2024 proposed consolidated budget, and what you're looking at is really the very biggest picture of our spending decisions. The Edina consolidated budget, so that's all the dollars that we would expect to spend in 2024, whether it's on personnel, it's on commodities, it's on capital, vehicles, anything. That's all the money we expect to spend, $188 million in 2024. That breaks down into three sub-areas. Governmental funds is number one, enterprise funds number two, and internal service funds number three. Most of our time each year is spent looking at one particular governmental fund, and that's the general fund. And that fund is about $63 million. That's so when you look at it compared to the whole, it's about a third of the whole, but it probably is 80% of our time and attention. And really that comes for a couple of reasons. One, that is where you find most city services like police and fire and community development and parks and recreation, engineering, all these services that directly touch folks are found in our general fund. It is also where we spend most of our property tax dollars to support those services. So that's just a big look at our entire consolidated budget. Next. And this is our timeline. So our timeline started on June 1. Our timeline for some of the preparation activities really started before June 1. But this takes us all the way up till tonight, which is the adoption of the preliminary levy later tonight. Again, taking up kind of a look at the big picture, we use our planning documents and community engagement processes really to drive our planning and our spending. So when you look at our Vision Edina future project that was driving for our comprehensive plan is really drives our operations, and our operations drives our budget. And the same thing is true on the capital side as well. These are our budget pillars, or our budget goals. These were established by the City Council a few years ago. We try to have a philosophy-driven budget and spending. We group our spending and program initiatives around four key goals: reliable service, better together, livable city, and strong foundation. We also have budget values. So stewardship, equity, health, and sustainability are our four budget values. This is where staff are always looking at our programs, our initiatives, our funding, our spending, and really trying to make sure that we incorporate one or more of our budget values into those decisions. So just to give you a quick look, what you're looking at here is a budget work plan. Our budget work plan is still in the formation process. So what I'm showing you tonight under this section of the presentation is just some samples of what this will ultimately look like when it's completed at the end of the year. But strong foundation is where we are taking a look at those tangible improvements, usually capital improvements in the community, that we're planning to accomplish or make major progress on in 24 and 25. The next category is reliable service. This is not where we find capital improvements. This is where we find services, new services many times. We're going to be looking at how we handle mental health calls for service in both our police and fire and other forms and other city services. This is where we talk about our relationships with the school district. And also this is where we're going to be spending time trying to figure out our relationship to the new cannabis legislation and where we have discretion and where we don't. Livable City is a plan for a connected and sustainable development in the city. So trying to advance our affordable housing goals, preparing for our comprehensive plan update in 2028. These are two examples that fit within the Livable City work plan. And finally, the Better Together is where we foster an engaged community, inclusive and engaged community. So this is where we talk about our community engagement processes, and we also start our planning for the 2025 Quality of Life Survey. We do that survey every 2 years, in fact, every odd year. Our proposed tax levy for 2024 is a total tax levy of $54,506,065. Represents a 9.33% increase from 2023. We have a forecasted tax levy for 2025 of $61,840,273. That's a 13.46% increase. That is just a forecast. Nothing you take, no action you take tonight formally approves that number. The action you take tonight only formally approves the numbers for the 2024 proposal that we're showing you tonight. And that's because the state statute does not allow us to do more than 1 year of budget approvals at a time. So we do two, but one is a hard budget approval. The other has always been a forecast. Some of what has been driving our costs for our operating levy increase for 2024 has been what typically drives our costs, and that's around salary and benefits for employees, contracts for goods and services, energy costs, telecom costs, things like that for our operating levy. We've had some significant, as many cities have, increases around workers' comp costs. And we've also made some investments in IT software and security for the upcoming year. We have several new positions that we are planning to implement with council's approval for 2024, and there's a cost associated with that. Centennial Lakes Park Operations will have a demand on the general fund this coming year of about $200,000. So in addition to the levy that we are asking for council approval for this year, we're also planning to inject $2 million of one-time revenues from our budget stabilization fund into the general fund to help buy down that operating levy for 24. Next. So now just a quick series of investments and impacts that result from those investments. And again, we've organized these around our four budget pillars. And again, I would say these are in a partial state of completion. They will continue to be completed and amended as we move forward into December. So when we talk about increased investment in our technology systems, this is not only to complete our work, but it's also to protect the public data that we maintain in our building, as in our utility systems, in our police information systems. We maintain really a lot of data here, and we want to make sure that we keep it safe. We talk about making investments in street lighting in the upcoming year, and trying to make those investments safe, and also because they have a safety component to them. But also we want to make sure that we're looking at energy usage and really want to be smart where we place street lighting to have the maximum value it can from a safety standpoint, but not as much light pollution on the other side. Next. Under reliable service, this is where we talk about some of our new services that we're recommending for the upcoming year. And one of those is the addition of 4 patrol officers, 3 in 2024 and 1 additional patrol officer in 2025. That has the ability of being able to make sure we have full shifts of officers whenever we need them, and also to provide them with adequate time off to decompress from their jobs. But also it provides us the ability to improve our public safety responses by making sure we have adequate staffing. Next is we want to respond to the increasing calls and the service complexity that result for our paramedics, that result from a lot of mental health challenges in the community, and really all communities are facing mental health challenges as well. We want to make sure that we can provide high market wage increases and competitive benefits to attract employees and keep employees here for our workforce. And finally, improve our safety and ability to respond to social disruption that we're seeing at some of our recreation enterprises, and not just for us to protect our staff, but also for our staff to protect the other patrons that are in a facility when we have a social disruption. And we've had a couple this past year that have been violent on occasion, and it's pretty scary for everyone involved. Next. So what do you get for your tax dollar? When we look at what are the services that we provide to everyone in the community, there are some that are here that are working all the time. 911 operators are here 24/7, 365. So are our police officers. So are our firefighters, paramedics. Our professionals in our in our public health division are here inspecting resident or rental homes, restaurants, and swimming pools to keep us safe in that regard. Building inspectors are doing the same when in new buildings and remodeled buildings. Parks employees are doing their best to maintain our beautiful parks and playgrounds. Public Works Department has an exceptional record of snow and ice removal from public streets. They also have a great record of maintaining streets for safety for driving cars, bicycles, and pedestrians. There's much more that you get for your tax dollar here, and we believe it's a good bargain, and we hear that from the public in our quality of life survey every other year. We also take a look at our quality of life survey from 2023 and try to evaluate some of the kind of larger trends that we see. One of the trends we see every year is that there's a high degree of appreciation and support for the overall quality of life in Edina. We think that means that we need to be able to maintain our current service levels and our current quality levels simultaneously in response to that. One of the findings from this year is that while people generally feel safe in the community, they're starting to feel that feeling has decreased over the past couple of surveys. So we're taking a deeper look at what that means and what parts of the community. But we're also trying to do that by not only increasing staffing levels of police officers on the street, but also increasing our public safety programming through neighborhood engagement officers, more traffic enforcement, a mental health response team, and our new MAC group, multicultural group, to try to increase the amount of positive contacts that we have in the community as well. One of our findings was that our fire department had exceptionally high ratings and appreciation for their work. So we want to continue that and the growth and development of our fire department, particularly around their ambulance services and particularly around the preparation for the new fire station number 2. Now getting into some of our numbers. This is a look at the estimated market value of the community from 2011 to 2023. The estimated market value really is the aggregation of all of the market values of every single parcel of property in the community. So that number for us in 2023 was $16.8 billion. It's one of the top 5 or 6 community estimated market values in the state. This is a property tax distribution pie, and what you're seeing here is how the typical property tax dollar is received by local taxing bodies. So, or this is where your money's going is another way to think of it. This particular property tax distribution is for a residential property taxpayer in the Edina School District in the Minnehaha Creek Watershed District. And so that 23% of the taxes that are paid by that person go to the city, 41% go to the Edina School District, 29% go to Hennepin County, and the remainder go to a number of smaller taxing bodies like the Watershed Districts, Metropolitan Council, Mosquito Control District, County HRA, etc. The estimated levy impact, first, it's the estimated median value home in Edina has went from $659,900 in 2022 to $696,600 in 2023, an increase of just over 5%. Edina's estimated market value, so that entire aggregated value of the city, went from $15.4 billion in 2022 to $16.8 billion in 2023, so a 9%. In that case, the aggregation of values in the community are rising faster than the median value, which is not something we've seen recently until this year. The 2024 estimated levy impact for the median value home of $659,900, that home pays about $164 a month in property taxes to fund all city-provided services. That median value house has gone up, as we noted previously, to $696, but the number for city property taxes would go from $164 to $177 each month. The tax valuation has risen, of course, but the cost of city services has risen about $12 a month. These are a couple of long-term graphs that we showed to council every year. The top line, the kind of darker line, is the total city tax on the median value home each year. So the median value changes every year. In 2013, it was $396,300. In 2024, as we noted a second ago, it's $696,600. So the lower line is just the city's property tax during that same time period. The next graph is the median home property tax history adjusted for CPI. So the first graph I showed you was unadjusted for CPI. This line is adjusted for CPI, but it's the same time frame. It's the city's property tax line on the bottom and the total property tax line on the top. This is the property tax history, again, for that same time period for a $400,000 home in Edina. This is the property tax history that they would see over that time period from 2010 to 2024. Pretty flat. How does Edina compare to other communities? These are a number of other communities that we use to compare ourselves for a lot of different things, for operations, policies, practices, things like that. The tax rate is established by their councils every year, just like we do. It's a kind of a derivative rate of spending divided by tax base, by estimated market value, produces that tax rate percentage. That tax rate also, though, drives how much the tax burden is on a $700,000 home, and we also have shown here the tax burden on a $1 million home as well for each one of those communities. This is just a different way to look at a similar comparison. This is the median value home for each one of these communities by their tax rate, and then the proposed levy increase is in the middle here as well. And on the far right column is the tax burden for the median value home in each community. Enhanced services or functions, one of the things we have in Edina that we're proud of is really a wide variety and array of city services. There are some cities that have advanced life service ambulance systems like Burnsville, but Burnsville doesn't have its own assessing division. It doesn't offer liquor. It doesn't offer its own 911 system. So we have something in common with Burnsville in that regard. We have the same kind of thing in common with the city of St. Paul. They have an ALS system. We have an ALS system. They have 911. We have 911. But we have our own assessing system. We have our own golf course. We have our own rental inspection program. So we do a lot of things that some cities do, and it really creates a well-rounded set of city services. Next steps for the city when it comes to the certifying the preliminary tax levy is to take an action on that item tonight. That sets the preliminary tax levy for 2024. Tax notices are mailed out to residents and taxpayers on November 11th through the 24th, typically the first half of that time period. Budget discussions continue, actually, as we kind of wind down to that mid-November time period. We like to get a firmer budget control in terms of more precise spending and revenue estimates by the end of November. We'll have a public hearing on the budget, proposed budget for 24, at our December 5th City Council meeting. Council could take final action on the 24 budget as early as December 5th, but you have to take a final action on the budget no later than December 19th. And that is the end of our presentation tonight. We'd be happy to, both Alicia and I would be happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, thank you for that thorough presentation. And this is something we've been working on for many months now. Trying to think about what's best for the residents of our community, and know that they've been particularly concerned in the last year or two about public safety, and I think this budget reflects that concern and responsiveness to it. But some of my colleagues may have questions for you, Manager Neal, or for Alicia, and let me turn to council members and see if they have additional questions. We had a good work session upstairs. We've been working on the budget in work sessions for, as I mentioned, several months, so there may not be as many questions as you'd normally have or you had during the process. But Councilmember Jackson?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So one of the things we did talk about, but I would like to just say publicly, is talking about the cost of staff turnover, and especially when we're thinking about trying to maintain our public safety staff. But a lot of the increases are for, increase in salary. So that the alternative is not necessarily saving money, because isn't staff turnover, both in terms of time and money, very expensive?
Staff turnover, Councilmember Jackson and members of council, is expensive and disruptive for us. City governments are no different than private businesses in this regard. We have difficulty in recruitment in certain job classes, certain kinds of functions. Some of those are very critical to our operations, like police. It takes a long time to recruit qualified folks to become police officers. We take a long look at them before we put them into those positions, so that we make sure that we have people that we can trust to provide public safety services in the city. And that's one of our key areas of our city government. It's one of the most competitive areas of city government as well. But when we have, and we have to be competitive with other communities as well, we think there are some pluses to Edina that other communities don't have, but we got to work hard and hustle to bring good candidates here as well.
Okay, thank you. I guess the other thing is, I think you covered this in your presentation, but can you remind us how much of this is as our street financing increase?
Thank you.
I think that's one of the drivers as well.
Yes, thank you, Councilmember Jackson, members of council. That is an important thing to remember, and I'm going to ask Alicia if she can find that exact number. But one of the things that is kind of baked into our construction fund and the tax levy that supports that construction fund is the council's decision from a couple of years ago to gradually move the city every year a little bit away from a complete reliance on special assessments for neighborhood street reconstruction program. We started that program, like I said, a few years ago, and I think I'm looking at the city engineer. We are maybe 3 years into an 18-year process. Is that right?
Yep.
Okay. So 3 years into an 18-year process. So at the end of 15 more years, we will have completed that transition from from a system in which we relied very heavily on special assessments to a system where we rely on tax levy. And my recollection, Alicia, is that we spend about 2% of that levy increase this year is related to that?
It's a little bit less than that. It's
Okay.
it's just shy of $300,000.
Okay.
Of the levy increase that's driven by the special street levy.
Yes, so that special street levy was, it looks like on the September 5th information, did you say 1.762? Actually, in 2024, 1.481 is special street levy. So that's a portion of it. Member Risser.
To just further clarification on the new positions we're creating, and I don't think we mentioned that one would be a mental response officer. So, and just clarify how many new positions and what they are.
Alicia, can you go, I know that you have that slide in the deck. Can you pull that one up, please? It's probably beyond it's in the appendix, I think.
One moment.
Okay. Well, while you're looking for it, we do have, as far as public safety or police department staffing goes, we have a proposal to add three patrol officers this year, one patrol officer next year, but also two other positions. One is what we've been calling a mental health response team or response officer, who is going to be a sworn police officer but have a special skill set in assisting people in mental health related calls. We also have a position that we want to establish on a firm, kind of permanent basis for neighborhood engagement from the police department. And so that's a total of 6 positions in the police department over the next 2 years.
That's in the September 5th slide deck, but I don't have a number on the slide. But
there it is. Yeah.
It's 4 patrol officers, 1 mental health investigator, and a neighborhood engagement officer.
I would also additionally add that these 2 positions you see called Park and Rec Program Facility Coordinator, one in 24 and one in 25, also have kind of a quasi public safety value to them as well. Those 2 positions are being added in response to the level of social disruption that we see in some of our recreation facilities, recreation enterprises. We need to have better, more experienced staffing at certain times of the night instead of just part-time folks. So that's what those positions are designed to do as well.
Other questions? Yes, Member Pierce.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to make a couple of comments, and then you may want to follow up, Manager Neal. But I think it is worth noting that we had a working session September 14th where we were sharing a proposal, some strategic work that we have been working on for affordable housing. And so I think it's worth talking about that, because that deck is public and it has in there, it references an increase in the HRA levy by an additional $1 million from what you're seeing today. And then we also had a number of residents at that meeting, and we've had emails following up from that referencing that levy. And so I thought I think it makes sense for us to just highlight that we, in our working session this afternoon, we also talked about that, and as a council, we decided to not include that additional $1 million in the tax in the preliminary budget, and so I think it's worth noting that, so I don't know if there's anything else you want to add.
Just that you're right, that documentation is present and people can find it and they can read it. And we've had some that have expressed concerns about it, even tonight at community comment. But that's not what's being proposed tonight or being considered by the council this evening. So you're correct about that. It is it's an operational expense or a capital expense that the council could give further consideration to. There are also in that under consideration some additional revenue and enhancements that could support attainable housing. And I think the council and the HRA will continue to look at those, as I recall. That was part of the discussion as well. But the discussion tonight and then later at your HRA meeting following this meeting is for an HRA tax levy that increases 3% from 23 to 24 and a little, maybe just a shade more than 3% in 25.
Thank you.
Thank you. Other comments? We've got a couple of resolutions to deal with on a preliminary approval basis, and I had the one up on the proposed HRA levy, but that was second in sequence. I think first in sequence is Resolution 2023-63, which would adopt the proposed budget and establish a proposed tax levy payable in 2024, and then of course we'll deal with this on a final basis in early December. So is there a motion to adopt Resolution 2023-63, which is a resolution adopting the budget on a preliminary basis for the City of Edina for the year 2024 and establishing the proposed tax levy payable on a preliminary basis for 2024 as well?
So moved.
Second.
Member Jackson moves the motion as stated, and Member Pierce seconds. Any further discussion? All those in favor of adoption of Resolution 2023-63 as stated, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Carried. And then the second part of the request from staff was the Resolution 2023-64, which is, it precedes our subsequent meeting on the HRA and the tax levy conversation, but this Resolution 2023-64 is a granting of City Council consent for the HRA tax levy payable in 2024 at the levels that Manager Neal was talking about, which are, I think, just a shade under 3%, and in consistency with what we've done over the past several years in terms of annual increases. Is there a motion to adopt Resolution 2023-64?
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Member Jackson, second by Member Pierce, to adopt Resolution 2023-64, which is a resolution granting the City Council, approving the City Council approving and giving consent to the HRA tax levy payable in 2024, which is being set at about 2.9 to about 3% over 2023. Any further discussion? Yes, Member Urser.
I have a procedural question. We are City Council. We have not received anything from the HRA about this matter, correct? Isn't this out of sequence?
Okay, well, yeah, typically the HRA would vote to approve its levy increase, and then the City Council would approve that. In this situation, we're giving consent. I think this is what is another, it's a workaround to answer it properly.
And this, it may seem like a little workaround, but this is the kind of thing that really bothers me in that, and partly I think it is because council is the HRA, and for the public and just for our credibility and everything, when we do things like these workarounds, it just seems as if we're making things up. And I do think sequencing matters. It's supposed to come from the HRA first. We haven't talked about it at the HRA, and so this also has to do with public engagement and public process, because if we were doing it in sequence, we would have had our HRA meeting, we would have discussed it, there would have been time between the HRA meeting end the meeting tonight as council, and so we would have been able to have time to weigh in, with one cap on, pull back, pause, engage with the public if they wanted to reach out to us, and really think about our roles. And it just feels like we're completely short-circuiting things, so I wanted to get that out there.
Manager Neal.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We can't do anything about the sequencing tonight, but we can do something about sequencing on the final approvals. So we will make sure that we do that.
Well, it seemed that, we could talk to our city attorney. I'm wondering if we could temporarily adjourn the city council meeting and go into the HRA meeting and get that dealt with and then come back into the city council meeting. I suppose that's another way to deal with it. We're so close to the end of the agenda.
We have done that before.
But doing that doesn't address the intent behind the issue. And so I personally think we should just continue with what was planned for tonight, and then for sure, Manager Neal address it on the final approval. And then, the intent behind the question is a bigger issue that I think it does make sense for us to weigh into, but that will just take time to do that.
I agree with Member Pierce. It seems like that would just be performative.
Okay, all right, let's continue on. So we have a motion and a second, I think, and I just was looking at our budget scenarios here, and I think the increase is 2.99% for 2024. We've got a motion and a second to adopt Resolution 2023-64. Any other comments or questions? All those in favor of adoption of Resolution 2023-64, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Carried.
Can I abstain?
Is there an abstention?
Yeah, there's an abstention.
Okay.
Thank you.
I didn't hear anything down that end, so I thought I'd better ask about the abstention. Okay, all right. Now, we've got a couple more matters in front of us this evening. The next matter is one that, let's see, Director Teague has this matter.
Yes, thank you, Mayor, members of council. This is a continuation of an ordinance amendment that was, you held a public hearing on a couple of weeks ago regarding our regulations surrounding multi-residential uses in the PCD 1 and 2 zoning districts. We have a conflict in the regulation. One section says multi-residential is a conditionally permitted use as a standalone type project, and another section says that retail has to be on the first level and basement. We've considered two options in amending the ordinance to clarify that, and both staff and the Planning Commission are recommending option B, which would require commercial use on the first floor and basement of all multi-residential uses in the PCD 1 and 2 zoning district. We did receive lots of feedback on Better Together, pretty much all in favor of option B. So with that, if you're comfortable with the language, we would recommend that you waive second reading and adopt option B, ordinance 2023-09.
And you want a waiver of second reading?
Yes, if you're comfortable with that language, yes.
Questions for Director Teague? Yes, Member Risser.
One of the things that really concerns me about this is that in the existing code, under special requirements, it does say, and that you cannot have residential use on the first floor or the basement. And so I did go and I looked at the special requirements for other zoning districts. And I feel as if, from a very pragmatic kind of commonsensical approach, having purely residential in the commercial zone makes no sense. And so thinking that, and then also realizing that it's already written in the code that it's not supposed to be there, but it's not in the proper position, I guess, makes me wonder what other special requirements could we have workarounds for. There is this, you cannot have parking ramps in R1, but that's a special requirement. So I guess all of this really kind of reaffirms a belief I've had for a while that we need to get a zoning consultant or, take a look at how we're doing zoning. And so I just wanted to say that I do think option B is the way to go. And we will have that language twice in our ordinance then. So hopefully it will really be followed. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Risser. Other thoughts, comments? Otherwise, is there a motion to approve Ordinance 2023-09, zoning ordinance amendment regarding multifamily housing in the city's PCD1 and PCD2 zoning districts, option B, and waive second reading?
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Member Jackson, second by Member Pierce to approve ordinance number 2023-09, zoning ordinance amendment regarding multifamily housing in the city's PCD1 and PCD2 zoning districts, selecting option B and waiving second reading. Any further discussion? All those in favor of adoption of the motion as stated say aye. Aye. Opposed? Carried. All right. And Manager Teague, Director Teague, and Attorney Kendall, thank you for your work on this, trying to get this issue cleaned up. And now we are on to, we don't have sketch plan, and that was the last one in this portion of the agenda, and so we are on to manager's comments.
Thank you, Your Honor, members of council. Two comments. One is just a reminder of the police open house tomorrow, 4:30 to 7.
4:30 to 7:30.
4:30 to 7:30. We will be closing access off in the afternoon to City Hall in order to get everything set up. So that's just to note that parking will be scarce, but we're really looking forward to a great open house event here. The second comment I have is to tell you about an organization that you've probably never heard of called 3CMA. 3CMA is the City County Communications and Marketing Association. It's the nation's premier network of local government communicators. It was founded in 1988. It has 1,500 members nationwide, and their new president for the upcoming year is Jennifer Bennerat.
Oh, hey.
So congratulations, Jennifer.
Thank you. You want to lead us off, Member Agnew?
I don't think that I have any tonight. Thank you.
Very good. Member Pierce.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I had kind of one thing, but I'm going to probably give two examples. But this week, or last week, I had a couple of conversations, and with residents, and one of the things that in both cases kind of irritated me is that I think oftentimes residents will make an assumption around, I'll say this way, our personal lives. And so the one that kind of really ticked me off was a comment when we had the issue at the high school. And I kind of got an email, and I think probably all of you guys got it. Well, sometimes, and I feel like God leads me to return a phone call or to reply to an email. And I say it that way because I don't always respond to all of them. And that day I actually was golfing in South Carolina. But I listened to the voicemail message and I returned the call. And it bothered me because my two oldest daughters graduated from the high school. My middle daughter is at Valley View. And so to have someone insinuate that I, as a council member, I'm responsible for that incident, and it's clear that I am not really focused or I don't care about it, and so it just rubbed me the wrong way. And so I returned the call, and it was contentious, right? But see, I think I was on hole 15, so I didn't play the last 3 holes. And I talked to this person the whole time. And about right through 15 and 16, we're both kind of going at it. And but by 17, we were on one accord. And I just thought it was a great, it was a good conversation, because I could share my concern and just clarify, I do care about this, and I care about it because I got a kid that's there. And we actually kind of bonded on that particular issue. And then when I got to 18, granted I wasn't playing, then we were talking about affordable housing and the missing middle. And so we were having this great conversation around their concerns and wanting to see more progress from the council. And then I distinctly remember saying, all right, I really do have to go now, but I'm going to let you have the last word. And this person talked about, hey, thanks for taking the time to allow them to kind of interrupt what I was doing and me engaging and listening, and I thank them for the same thing. And I thought it ended in a good place. But I do just would like to make the point, if you don't know the city staff and the council members, we're happy to share with you what's important to us. I have no issue talking about my family. We're public servants, and so there's a part of that that goes along with it. But I do think that if we can do that more, and that goes 2 ways. It's us, maybe being open, but it's also residents not making assumptions about things and seeking first to understand, I think can lead to some really great conversations. And I'd go a step further to say, could be some transformative conversations that I think the community would benefit from. So I had 2 of those last week. I think they ended in a great place. The first one was a comment about, I want you to know who you're raising taxes on. And, I kind of said, well, I don't need a reminder of that. I look in the mirror every day because I live here, and I look around my breakfast table because my kid is there, my wife is there. So the things that I am trying to represent, I believe, are the things that are best for the community, both in the near term and in the future. And can I be wrong in that? Sure. But I think progress comes from people having a vision around what they think we should do and going after that in a respectful way. And so that was it. It was a great the exchanges were awesome. But I would just ask residents, if you want to know more about, especially me, I'm happy to meet you at Jerry's or wherever to have coffee. Right? It's pretty easy to get me to do that. So so definitely reach out. And that's it.
That was a lot.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Those 2 things.
Thank you for those. Member Jackson.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So this week is homecoming for Edina High School. I talked to Dr. Stanley this morning. She's very excited, and I hope it's a fun and safe weekend. I hope everybody can come to the parade. And she also said a real shout out to the Edina Police Department. And she said she got the call from them at 10:30 at night on Thursday night. And by 10:30 the following morning, they had apprehended this person. And it's an incredible turnaround. And I just wanted to have a shout out to the outstanding work by our Edina Police Department and their cooperation with other law enforcement. But really good job. Let's see. We had a great discussion about housing, and I'm sad that we are squeezed for time with the levy tonight, because I think the community needs to be brought along on this discussion, and I have some unresolved questions, but I do want to acknowledge the incredible creativity of member peers. I'm so thankful for all your work, and I'm slow in this, and I admit that, and it makes me sad that I'm slow, but I do want to acknowledge your very hard work and your continuing commitment to just solving some really big, knotty problems. And I think I'm missing something, but I'm just excited about the Art Center actually being a possibility. I can't tell you how excited I am. Russ has been, he's my neighbor, and he and many others just consistently, please, 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 this is important. So shout out. And are we going to talk about Lincoln Drive?
I think we should.
Yeah,
We'll
okay.
get to the end of the conversation
Okay,
and maybe loop back.
Okay.
We'll do a loop back on the small area plan conversation on 169 Bread Road or Lincoln Drive.
Okay, thank you.
Member Urser.
Actually, you teed that up lovely, because I was thinking we really need to have a better strategy in terms of how we approach area plans. And we have one community that really wants us to look at their area and come up with, the funds and the energy so that we can hear what they need to say and what we should hear and how it can be developed, and that will lead to a better situation. And then we have other communities that have no idea that they may become the subject of a site plan. And I'm just thinking about smaller neighborhoods that may be caught off guard, that they could possibly be designated an area of change. And I'm thinking about Hankerson Avenue, perhaps, or Grandview Lane. And so, what are we doing so that we're not surprising neighborhoods? What are we doing so that we're being responsive to them? So that's what I had to say.
Okay, good. Thanks. Member Risser also suggested to Manager Neal and to me the third Sunday in November, World Day of Remembrance for Road Traffic Victims, and we're going to try to make sure we do something about that. So thanks for that observation and recommendation. We talked a little bit with Bloomington Public Health tonight about fentanyl, and there was quite a bit of conversation at the leadership meeting of the U.S. Conference of Mayors weekend before last, and when I was out there in San Diego as chair of the Standing Committee on Transportation, had a report out on federal legislation. We spent quite a bit of time on that Friday on legislative activities around mental health, ghost guns, and I'll give you a little bit of information about all of that. So that was it was a really productive meeting, but I've been thinking a little bit about this cannabis as a public health issue, and I'm wondering if, as we go about working on these work plans now, if we should talk to our community health folks about, as we work on the public policy side of it, if we should have them look at the public health aspects of it. And maybe they could even take a short look at fentanyl, although I think that would be a lot more difficult for them to deal with. That Saturday afternoon of the leadership meeting, we spent the afternoon down on the border. And I think they said that 40% of the fentanyl comes in through San Ysidro, which is a San Diego entrance. It's 100,000 vehicles and people a day moving through that port. And just in a couple of hours that we were there, people were coming in handcuffs. You know, they had 54 dogs working down there that knew how to detect 6 kinds of narcotics, and they had dogs trained to detect people being smuggled, and it was remarkable. It had that feeling of a kid with a finger in the dike as you tried to deal with all of these problems, and it's just a wave of people and vehicles coming northbound out of Mexico, and then we went up on the border itself with U.S. Customs and with the Border Patrol, and I should send that photo, but there's a double wall up there. It's spread. It's all on U.S. soil, but the primary wall is next to Tijuana, let's say, and about 2 feet onto U.S. property, and that's maybe 20 feet high and louvered. And it's louvered so they can see who's behind the wall, and it's louvered and wide enough so you could build a ladder out of rebar and stick it through there, and then come up one side and go down the other. But then you've got about quite a ways to the secondary wall, which is probably twice the height. And then we're talking about in Tijuana, there's a neighborhood right across from that wall that's been there since I think the 60s. That they're generational smugglers of all kinds of things. So the whole thing was just kind of fascinating. And the people that were there were really dedicated to their jobs, so you had to give them a lot of credit. But I do think let's have a conversation at some point in time about whether we should ask our health commission to look at cannabis as a public health issue. Other things that happened at the meeting, we spent quite a bit of time on mental health. We spent almost half of one morning on mental health that first morning. And then Tom Perez was there from the White House to talk about some of the challenges that we're facing out there, but also these unprecedented opportunities, as he characterized it. And lamenting that there's been no immigration reform since the late 90s. And I thought he had an interesting comment. He said, we're a nation of laws, but we're a nation of immigrants, and we can do both. We can do both. We just have to figure it out together how to do it. So he said, remember this moment is an unprecedented time of opportunity, moment of opportunity. And we had a session on homelessness. We talked about that a little bit, and some of the folks that we see in our community that are on some of the intersections, and I've had folks call me worrying about them, not in a negative way, but a positive way, wondering if they are indeed homeless and how can we help them. So that's something else that we'll be probably thinking about and giving some attention to. Also a guy named Josh Friday was there, who was from the Governor Gavin Newsom's office, talking about a youth jobs program that they're studying in California. Because they have, so many people are that they feel like people have lost their sense of purpose and the sense of caring about each other, which I feel still exists in Minnesota. But they really were worrying about it out there, and so they wanted to create this job program in every city in California and try to get people to start thinking about the interrelationship of human beings. Scott, one note for you. Rich Anderson from the conference has a really good sense of the IRA and the opportunities under the IRA. And I think, Chad, some of these projects that we've got around our sewage control, some of the big projects we're doing, I think we might be eligible for some IRA money. At least, so we should have a conference call with Rich Anderson from the conference, and he'll tell us about some of those opportunities. He thought the one that you were doing down south of Cornelia School as a refurbishing or an enhancement was really in a good position for some federal funding. So let's talk about that. Some of the other cities talked about their homelessness problem. LA County, 90,000 people homeless, 45,000 just in LA. And it's Karen Bass, the mayor, they don't know what to do. Proliferation of ghost guns. We talked a lot about that. We see some of that issue around here. And all over the country, the people were lamenting that the juvenile justice system is in its worst shape in years. And we see that here. And so we're continuing that HEALS conversation where it's an educational tool and an informational tool. And we've got our next meeting. If anybody wants to get invited to that, I'll make sure you get invited. It's a virtual meeting. It's on the 29th at 11:30. And we'll have Mark Osler from Edina talking about his new job working in the county attorney's office. We'll have the head of the juvenile division talking about their new strategy around auto theft by juveniles, which I think we're all interested in hearing what that is. And then maybe the new Commissioner of Public Safety, Chief Judge Todd Barnett, we've had him here. Remember, he was here to give us a report as the Chief Judge. We're trying to get him at the meeting as well. And so that's essentially what that's about. Let's see quickly, what else? There was a guy there from the U.S. DOT, one of the undersecretaries who used to be at the White House, who gave us a shout out on Saturday morning as they were touting this whole Vision Zero program, zero traffic deaths, and he said, Edina's had zero traffic deaths for over 5 years, and so people are looking around, and it was just one of those sort of lucky moments, where your town gets a shout out. And I think that's, some of the alliances had reports out. There's a new women's health initiative going on that Elizabeth Couch from Burnsville is running. And then I mentioned that trip down to the border, which was interesting as well. So that's kind of a nutshell version of what happened at the leadership meeting. And then I think we should just pivot a little bit and talk about a potential small area plan for 169 Bren Road area, or you call it the Lincoln Drive area.
Yeah, before we do that, you did prompt something that I've forgotten, and that is we're holding a continuing legal education and overall education process. This group I've been working with to fight wage theft, because one of the big reasons that I'm involved in this is that labor trafficking and drug trafficking often go hand in hand. And when they're smuggling people in, they're also smuggling drugs in, and then using them to underpay and build illegally. Without paying properly. So that's October 7th from 9:30 to 1 at the Carpenters Union in St. Paul. And part of that is it will be a continuing legal education. I hope we get city attorneys to come. So Attorney Kendall, if you can share that information, I'd appreciate it. All of you are invited. It's really informative, and it's kind of jaw-dropping when you hear the stories of these workers who have been injured or unpaid. So I invite you all. Thank you.
All right, good. Director Teague, you and I talked about this today when I was over here to do the mayor's minute. We've had some people write to us and say, we think you ought to do a small area plan in that Bren Road 169 area that encompasses 19 acres. We've had other people say 44 acres, make it more expansive, include the load and include children's hospitals, office buildings, those older buildings, include the strip mall. And you've got some thoughts on that as to if we were to think about this as a council and direct the planning commission to start that work. A, is there funding for it, and B, can we get it in their work plan? And what do you recommend in terms of a scope of such a study?
Yes, thank you, Mayor, members of the council. I believe that we should expand the boundary beyond that 19 acres to include those 3 parcels that you mentioned, the old children's office building, the load, and then the little strip center. And it comes to around 44 or 45 acres. That should be the project area. The Planning Commission does not have that included in their proposed work plan, so this would be in addition to, and so we don't have anything specifically budgeted for, but it's good timing as you're preparing your budget for next year.
Manager Neal, you and I talked about it too, about the ability to find funds if we wanted to do this, and you thought that was an issue that we could address.
We have identified some potential funding for the project if we intend to do it.
And Director Teague, would you take something off of their workload to make room for this, so we don't put too much of a burden on the Planning Commission, or what would be your thought there?
It is a pretty heavy work plan proposal that they will be bringing to you. We do have a little more capacity in our department, so I think a lot of the things we can get done. But we can add this to the list, and then we'll have to prioritize what we think we can and can't do.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't want to take anything off at this point yet.
Yeah, well, thanks for raising an important point, and that is staff capacity.
Right.
We haven't talked about that. Do you think that your staff has the capacity to?
I think we do.
And then with outside consultants, if you need them to?
I do. We would need the consultant for the small area plan.
Okay.
And there's still the issue of
on this idea that's surfaced from a variety of different sources. Member Risser?
I really think this is a valuable use of our resources, because if we're not planning, failure to plan is a plan to fail. And this is a large area of Edina. For many, many years, it has been identified as a place where we really should be doing a study. And I think, there is an item on the work plan that I would recommend removing, which is spending time trying to figure out what happened with the drooling moose. And I think if you created 2 industrial zones, you could figure that out faster. But I really think we need to talk about what our priorities are, and I think this needs to be a priority.
Others?
Yes.
Member Jackson?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I think this is a great idea. I think what came up when we looked at the idea of the restaurant on Vernon was an overwhelming response from the community that we need something to do in that part of town. And I don't know where else it could happen easily. I had talked with Manager Neal a little bit about drawing the area actually much bigger, because I think we need to understand what the sewer capacity is in that whole quadrant. Or, Addison has that map, Mr. Lewis, in your department, of where density can be added safely and where it can't be. And I think that, this strip along 169, we have the capacity to go into Minnetonka, and they've been friendly about that for this one project. But I think that we need to understand what can and cannot be done in this area, and so I would maybe even draw it bigger so that we just know what the future of this whole, it's not the whole quadrant, but it's a big part of it that's affected by this. So that's the one thing that I would add to that, but I think it's a great idea, and I think there's a real demand in the area for some understanding about how this could change over time.
Member Pierce?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I think that is the right outcome. But my question is that we've seen a proposal for a 7-story apartment complex over there. And so just procedurally, what does that mean for that project? Is one question. And then the second question, I had in various conversations have said, well, I don't think we should do an apartment complex. We should think about townhomes. And I don't think the comprehensive plan, the way it is written today, would allow for that. And so then my other question is, all right, if we do a small area plan, are there things that I think that we may think we should be considering that are off the table when you start thinking about the overall comprehensive plan? And so those are some of the questions that I have, but I think it's the right thing to do. And we don't have to answer those questions tonight. I still think it's the right thing to do. But those are some of the questions I would have.
Director Teague?
Yeah, one thing to consider. So if we're doing a small area plan for the area, a property owner can still make an application that we have to process, and we have to run that through within 120 days. The other option is adopting some type of a moratorium ordinance that would prohibit any application during the time of the study. So that might be something to consider.
But just because you've seen a sketch plan from somebody, they've got no development rights there. That's.
Mm-hmm. Member Agnew.
Thank you. I love the idea of doing a small area plan here. I think that it should be the larger 44-acre area. I think that really enables the group working on this to think collectively, not that they couldn't otherwise, but how it fits into that bigger picture, I think is really important. I just want to, and I know that our city staff will do this appropriately, but make sure that whatever is determined is properly communicated to the developer who did bring the initial proposal, because I don't want them to feel, if this were to be something that we pursued, that they were caught off guard by hearing that it were pursued. So I just want to make sure that we partner with them as well, knowing that what we've asked for as a city is more affordable housing options, and they've come with a proposal to do that. And so I just want to make sure we really treat that carefully. Thank you.
I think to Member Jackson's point, that if we set that area, as Member Agnew says, and I think most people agree, the larger area that you're suggesting, what we find that there is infrastructure issues that affect that 44-acre area, I'll call it, that are external to that area, we should know that. That may or may not cause us to expand the study area, but at least we'll know what the infrastructure issues are that impact that area, either internally or externally.
Mr. Mayor? I think I feel enough interest and probably support for this, so I think we can put together a council action for you to take a formal action on at your next meeting, at the October 3rd meeting.
Okay. All right, and then I think to Member Agnew's point, I'm sure that you'll be visiting with Solheim, Gunsbury,
Yep.
Kurt Gunsbury.
Yep. We can do that.
Give him a heads up. I expect that he would be patient. I think you mentioned moratorium, the word moratorium. It's a tricky thing. So, having been through it once or twice, mostly in residential areas, but we can talk about it if it becomes necessary. But in the meantime, you might be able to just hold them at bay until we get the work done. But to the point that Member Pierce raised, it seems to me like when you're doing a small area plan, you're not eliminating potential uses. You're looking at all options, including his initial idea, which was, gee, this looks like a great site for townhomes. Well,
correct. Yeah, the density that's allowed there is up to 75 units an acre, and there's limited capacity. So that might be an issue for reducing the density, but yes, all options should be on the table.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay. Anybody else have anything for the good of the order? All right. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
We got a little more work to do, though, don't we? Don't get too excited. Okay, we got a motion and a second to adjourn the meeting of the City Council. Excuse me. Any further discussion? All those in favor of adjournment of the City Council meeting this 19th day of September 2023, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? You stand adjourned. I think we need a couple of minutes to switch over.